Chapter 161. Jun Wui frowned slightly. "Mos, yeah, you and I both know that whether Qing Han stays or goes is the housekeeper's own business and has nothing to do with the Jun family. Although Qing Han holds the title of the Jun family's granddaughter-in-law, it's only in name. In fact, we didn't even have the time to hold the wedding ceremony. So, Qing Han can't be considered as a member of the Jun family in terms of etiquette and fact. However, when your brother died, Qing Han was overwhelmed with grief. In order to take care of her emotions and prevent her from doing anything extreme, we had no choice but to do so. But Qing Han is still young, and she will have another happy marriage. The two of them have a tacit understanding, and even the divorce papers for the annulment of the engagement have already been prepared. It was personally drafted by your grandfather when your elder brother was killed, and it has been preserved ever since. So long as Qing Han nods her head, our Jun family will immediately use all our power and channels, including the families and the governments, to announce to the world that she will be a pure woman. If Qing Han decides to leave, we will sincerely be happy for her. If Qing Han can find a good match, the Jun family will also send her off in large numbers. It's too unfair for her to stay alone in the Jun family. Do you understand this point?" Jun Wui raised his head to look at the bright moon in the sky. His eyes were full of deep regret. Qing Han is really a very good girl. It's our Jun family and your brother who are not blessed. Third uncle, if sister-in-law can really find a good match, we will naturally be happy for her, but I always feel that the housekeeper is a little strange. Jun Moxie frowned. He suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. If the housekeeper ignores Qing Han's happiness and only weighs the interests of the family, then it's naturally a different matter. The housekeeper is Qing Han's maiden family, but the Jun family is Qing Han's maiden family. How can the Jun family's daughter be treated lightly? Jun Wui said in an awe-inspiring tone. This sentence revealed the demeanor of a Tianxian expert. Third uncle, you're really bold. You're worthy of being a Tianxian expert, a blood general. Jun Moxie applauded. Get lost. Jun Wui kicked Jun Dashao's buttocks. Tianxian's skills were not to be underestimated. Jun Moxie flew out like a cloud, and a black thing caught up to him and burrowed into his arms. That's what you want. Jun Wui chuckled, and walked away in a leisurely manner. Being able to take advantage of his nephew was a very rare opportunity. The Jun Dashao assassin did a beautiful somersault in the air, landing safely with the legendary, but facing the balance while flattening the sand while falling wild goose style. He glided forward for a while, and then got up with a roll. Jun Wui's strength was on point. He only sent Tianxian flying with a kick but did not injure him at all. This fully demonstrated the strength of Tianxian's master. Jun Moxie took out the black object from his bosom and smiled mysteriously. It was a 6th-level Xian beast Xian Dan. The sun was setting in the west, and it was already the afternoon of the next day. Jun Moxie carried 2 jars of wine and sat in the carriage that he hated the most, a palanquin. He wobbled all the way to Old Song's tavern. At this time, Old Song's tavern was already full of anxious people. Old Song had originally planned to open for half a day, but after thinking about it, he decided to close the tavern for the entire day. He directly put up a sign and closed the tavern. In any case, 1 day of business wouldn't make much of a difference. Then he began to tidy up the tavern in preparation for the competition in the afternoon. Competing in drinking was one of Old Song's greatest pleasures in his life. This was not just one of the pleasures, but the only one. That kind of excitement was far more intense than when he fought against an expert of the same level. Although he did not know if the little demon could really bring a heavenly wine that was 100 times better than his, he could not help but be filled with anticipation. Although he was convinced that there was no such thing as a heavenly wine in this world, but since the little demon dared to boast, even if the wine he brought wasn't as good as he claimed, it was still enough to make him look forward to it. In the morning, the originally dirty tavern had unexpectedly become clean and spotless. The snow-white wall cloth covered the surroundings and even the roof. It hung all the way to the ground. On the ground, there was an additional layer of light green carpet. The tables and stools that were missing arms and legs were all swept away. In their place were 2 long tables made of high-quality white jade. In addition, there were also several good-quality rosewood chairs arranged neatly. On the tables, there were 24 white jade wine cups stacked together in the shape of a steeple. There were 2 of them, and a total of 48 cups. At the corners of the walls hung a string of pearls the size of pigeon eggs. The pearls hung from the top to the bottom, emitting a gentle radiance that was reflected and refracted by the white jade tables and white jade wine glasses. The entire tavern was filled with gorgeous and dazzling colors. Anyone who entered this tavern would inevitably feel as if they had stepped into a dreamy paradise. That day, the middle-aged man excitedly stepped into the tavern. Suddenly, he cried out in surprise and withdrew his foot. He looked around suspiciously. That's right, this is the location of Old Song's tavern. How did it suddenly become even cleaner and more luxurious than my prince's mansion? This place is no longer the shabby tavern of the past. It can even be said to be a paradise in heaven, or a paradise on earth, right? Old Song hurriedly came over to greet the middle-aged man. Only then did the middle-aged man walk in hesitantly. As he looked around, he clicked his tongue in wonder. Old Song, you are too strange. Today is called a drinking competition, but in the end, isn't it just 2 cups of wine? Is there a need to make it so serious? This prince is so scared that he doesn't dare to come in. This Old Song knows his true identity. In front of him, there is no need to worry too much. You can't say that. Wine may be a small matter to others, but to me, it is the most important thing in the world. Moreover, I have a hunch that this drinking competition will be the kind of fight that I've always dreamed of. Or perhaps, it will be the most precious memory of my life. Old Song solemnly said. Song Shang. So you are Song Shang. The Song Shang who toasted the king with a cup of wine, but sent the king with a body full of wounds. The prince was surprised. Then, he smiled and said, but why are you not hiding your identity in front of me today? Is there any meaning in continuing to hide it? Song Shang smiled bitterly. 3 days ago, the black-robed man had already exposed his identity. So, what was there to hide? Even if he continued to hide it, it was pointless. If it wasn't for today's drinking competition, Old Song would have closed the tavern 3 days ago and found another place to hide. It is said that Song Shang was a handsome and elegant man. He has a strange habit. Before killing someone, he must give them a cup of wine. He is known as the wine gentleman. Sending a cup of wine to the king, urging the king to go to the Yellow Springs. But for what reason did Brother Song become like this? The prince asked with a smile. The past is unbearable. There is no point in mentioning it. Song Shang shook his head. His eyes were filled with bitterness. The prince tactfully didn't continue to ask. At his side, there was a 10-year-old boy. The boy was as cute as a porcelain doll. In front of strangers, the boy tried his best to maintain a calm and graceful appearance. But secretly, a small hand was tightly gripping the prince's clothes. This is my son, Yang Imo. The prince stroked the boy's head with a loving expression. His bones are good. A faint voice said. The prince and Song Shang turned their heads at the same time. They saw that the black-robed man had silently appeared on a chair. His expression was calm, as if he didn't see the earth-shattering change in the tavern. Thank you for your praise. With the prince's eyesight, he naturally knew that this black-robed man was not ordinary. He was most likely one of the legendary figures. Otherwise, the peerless assassin Song Shang wouldn't be so afraid of him. The prince didn't take his cold words to heart. He thought that if his son could catch the eye of this mysterious man, then it would be a great fortune for him. Who knew that the black-robed man would only glance at the prince's son? Then, he turned around indifferently, as if he had lost interest. The atmosphere in the tavern suddenly became silent. At present, one side of the drinking competition had arrived. The 2 judges had already arrived, but the other side was nowhere to be seen. Is it stage fright? The hitman June naturally wouldn't have stage fright. After all, why would he have stage fright in a competition that he was sure to win? However, Jun Dashao would never have thought that this little drinking competition would involve a grandmaster, a Tianxian expert, and a prince and an heir. And now, these people, who could shake the entire Jianghu with a stamp of their feet, were sitting there waiting for Jun Dashao's arrival. First class, not coming; second class, still not coming; still not coming; still not coming. What a big show. The three men felt indignant at the same time. Even the black-robed man was no exception. These three men, no matter where they went, always had others waiting for them. When had they ever waited for someone else? Unfortunately, they had run into Jun Moxie, who had made them wait for so long. After a long time, the black-robed man slightly raised his eyebrows. After 2 breaths, Old Song's face moved. By the time the prince heard the commotion, the palanquin had already arrived at the entrance of the alley. Jun Moxie got out of the palanquin at the entrance of the alley and instructed the others to wait there. He only brought 2 people with him, each holding a jug of wine, and leisurely walked in. It wasn't that he didn't want to sit in the palanquin, but the location of the pub was quite remote. The alley was even narrower than the palanquin, and if he were to force his way in, then the pedestrians on both sides would have no choice but to stand in the middle of the palanquin. Although he got out of the palanquin, Jun Dashao's swaying was even more exaggerated than when he was sitting in the palanquin. This wasn't because Jun Dashao was deliberately putting on airs, it was because this means of transportation was too bumpy. Even the roller coasters of his previous life were worse than this, so how could he not sway when he got out of the palanquin? Jun Mo Xia lifted the curtain and walked in. Just like the prince, he immediately took a step back. His eyes were round, and he spoke after a while. "Old Song, is today your wedding night?" Old Song was dumbfounded. The prince burst into laughter. After looking around the room, Jun Moxie said with dissatisfaction, "Didn't we agree to meet in the afternoon? Why are you here so early?" As soon as these words came out, the three men glared at each other. Even the black-robed man, who had a good upbringing, couldn't help but stare at them. Chapter 162. Jun Mo Xia laughed, and didn't speak any more nonsense. He waved his hand, and the 2 warriors behind him carried a jug of wine, and gently placed it on the table. Suddenly, the 3 of them focused their attention on the 2 jugs of wine. Only this much? Only 2 small jugs? The prince was a little disappointed. 2 jugs is too little. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. These 2 jugs are worth 20,000 taels of silver. I can't even drink for free. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug? Song Laosan snorted, I have never heard of a wine that is worth 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. Just the price alone is 100 or even 1,000 times more than the price of this Song's wine. This time, I've really broadened my horizons. His words were said with a hint of sarcasm in them. Frog at the bottom of a well, how can you know the vastness of the Milky Way? You are the one who has seen the world. Jun Moxie said without any trace of politeness. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and start, we still have things to do when we get back. I haven't even said that this wine is actually blended. My wine should be worth 10,000 taels of silver for a cup. The 3 of them saw this brat's overbearing attitude and couldn't help but get angry. The black-robed Lady Lengling snorted and looked at the jug of wine. The aroma of the wine is only so-so, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Who is good and who is bad, we will only know after tasting it. How can we know the quality of the wine before tasting it? Jun Moxie also snorted coldly. The 3 of them sat down angrily. The 2 judges had already made up their minds. If the 2 wines are about the same, or even if this brat's wine is slightly better, they will still give Song Laosan the victory. Let's see how arrogant this brat is. A small jug of wine costs 10,000 taels of silver. Why don't you just rob the treasury? Ah! Why is there a little girl here? Jun Moxie looked at little Yang Imo in surprise and praised, not bad. Beautiful eyebrows and phoenix eyes. In the future, when you ask for my hand in marriage, you will definitely break the threshold. TSK. I'm a man, a man. Little Yang Mo was so angry that he forgot his shyness and let go of the hem of his father's clothes. He clenched his fists tightly and glared fiercely at June Moxie with his black and white eyes. His voice was filled with Tong Rui's voice. Really? Why can't I tell? You don't even have an Adam's apple. Even the voice is a girl's. June Moxie shook his head and squinted at him. Why don't you take off your pants to prove it? This was obviously bullying. It would be strange if such a young child had an Adam's apple. I'm really a man. The little fellow clutched the waistband of his trousers tightly, his little face flushed red. He was very afraid that this shameless strange uncle would come over and pull off his trousers. Let's say you are a man. June Moxie giggled. Come, little girl, watch me compete with your grandfather in drinking. He pointed at Wanya. I'm a man. The little guy screamed again. Besides, that's my father. Pfft. The few of them laughed at the same time and rocked back and forth. June Moxie also laughed and rubbed his hair. Okay. Didn't I say that you are a man? Is that okay? Okay. The little fellow didn't notice the other meaning in June Moxie's words. He whispered in June Moxie's ear, if you still don't believe me, I'll take off my pants and show you my D*CK when there's no one around. June Mo Xia was left dumbstruck. He had been defeated. Although the little fellow spoke softly, which one of the people present didn't have a keen sense of hearing? Even if the little guy's voice had been 10 times softer, they would have still been able to hear him. So, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. June Mo Xia's teasing made everyone feel as if the distance between them had been shortened by a lot. June Moxie secretly smiled in his heart. Amusing a child. Although the hitman had lived 2 lives, he had never done such a thing before. But he was using this method to make everyone laugh and liven up the atmosphere. Then after the drinking competition, wouldn't it be easier to talk about anything? However, no matter how strong an expert was, it would be useless to argue with a child. Looking at a mysterious master and a Tianxian master, June Moxie felt that he would be letting himself down if he didn't make use of this opportunity. Old Song carefully came out of the inner room, holding 2 jars of wine as if they were treasures. There was a thick layer of dust on top of these jars, and no one knew how long they had been there. In order to be fair, since you only brought 2 jars of wine, then I will also bring 2 jars. Old Song was somewhat proud of himself. These 2 jars of wine had been brewed when he was in the prime of his life. He had used the best fruits and spring water to brew these 2 jars of wine. This wine was brewed when I was 28 years old. Back then, I was in the prime of my life. I traveled from the snowy peaks to the north, to the glaciers to the south, to the drifting clouds to the east, and to the Pengduan Mountains to the west. I spent 5 years collecting more than 30 types of exotic flowers and fruits, then mixed it with the essence of the 5 grains and water from the snowy peaks to brew it. Song Shang's hand rested on the jars of wine as he spoke with a sad expression on his face. After I brewed this wine, I suffered a series of major changes, and was unable to recover. I hid in Tianxiang, and never came out again. At that time, I was only able to brew these 2 jars of wine, and was not willing to drink them. These 2 jars of wine can be regarded as the pinnacle of my life. As he said this, the prince and the black-robed man, Solitary Eagle, became even more interested. For 5 years, you searched all over the world, just to brew a dozen jars of wine. Solitary Eagle shook his head. If it were me, I would never have been able to do it. Just this point alone makes this wine worth drinking. Worth drinking? Huh. Song Shang's smile was very strange, and there was a feeling of sadness in his heart. I have been wholeheartedly making this world's best wine for a few years, and the world has changed for me. Well said, the quality of the wine is indeed secondary. Just this persistence is worthy of praise. June Moxie applauded. However, persistence is not synonymous with success. In the end, the quality of the wine needs to be judged by the taster's objective opinion. The three glared at the same time. Jun Dashao's words had offended all three of them. Persistence is not synonymous with success, and he was clearly saying that this wine was not the best wine. What objective opinion? Was he clearly saying that the judge would be biased? Solitary Eagle Lenglang looked at him. Just a moment ago, he was somewhat pleasing to the eye, but now he suddenly felt that he was very annoying. He actually dared to disagree with this old man, and even dared to question this old man's judgment. He could not help but say coldly, "Young man, are you saying that persistence is not important? Let me ask you, since ancient times, when successful people, whose deeds have been passed down for thousands of years, which one of them was not particularly persistent? Success isn't something that can be determined by just talking. Although persistence is important, it depends on whether persistence is worth it." Jun Moxie was not the slightest bit afraid, and said coldly, "Having confidence and being able to succeed, this is called admirable. However, if you know that there is no hope and still persist, then you are the number one fool in the world." That's right, since ancient times, all successful people have a special characteristic, and that is persistence. Once they have identified a goal, they will not look back, and they will work hard all the way, and finally create their own world. And their stories will be passed down for generations. For example, in terms of conquering the mainland, our Tian Xiang's founding emperor, Yang Kai Tian, in terms of Xian cultivation, such examples can be found everywhere. However, what Senior said just now was very reasonable. Success or failure was not something that could be determined by words alone. I believe that any famous Xian cultivation master does not rely on words alone. Xian cultivation master, oh? Do you know which Xian cultivation masters? Solitary Eagle had piqued his interest. There are 8 Xian cultivation masters in the world, and they are very famous. It would be hard not to know of them, right? The number 1 is the elusive Supreme Eagle, Yunbi Chen, who is accompanied by a level 9 Xian beast, and his cultivation has been rumored to be at the peak of Supreme Shen Xians. He is free and unfettered, but every time he appears in the world, something earth-shattering will happen. That's right. Solitary Eagle nodded slowly. The prince and Song Shang heard the name Supreme Eagle, Yunbi Chen, and their faces were filled with awe. Yunbi Chen had indeed become a legend. An immortal existence. The second one is the great master Li Ju Tian. He does as he pleases, and does not distinguish between good and evil. He is vicious and merciless, but his cultivation is at the peak of Xian cultivation. No one can doubt this, and I believe that no one would dare to. The number 3 is the mysterious master of the Silver Blizzard City, Han Feng Shui. Jun Mo Xia had mentioned the Silver Blizzard City, and the solitary falcon's face had slightly twitched in response. The 4th is the Heaven's Equal Peaks freak, Mo Wentian. Jun Mo Xia saw his reaction, but continued to speak without batting an eyelid. This person is said to be from Tian Xiang. The number 5 is Supreme Lei Wu Bei. The 6th is the Grandmaster of the Shenxi Empire, who is rumored to be Mo Wen Tian's archenemy, the life and death supremacy Shi Chang Shao. This person is currently in Tian Xiang City. Jun Moxie smiled coldly. The number 7 is Supreme Meng Hongchen, who lives in seclusion in the Blue Sea. As for the number 8, he. Jun Moxie smiled calmly, "It's hard to say." "What's so hard to say?" Solitary Eagle raised his eyebrows, and looked at Jun Moxie with a cold gaze. "It's just a name." "Is it hard to say?" "The number 8 should be tied by 2 people in the eyes of the world." Jun Moxie smiled mysteriously. Solitary Eagle of the Grasslands and Feng Wanyan of the Fierce Gale Swordsman have been fighting for the number 8 position for half their lives, and have yet to determine a winner. That's why I said that the number 8 position will be shared between the 2 of them. What do you mean by no winner? That Feng Wanyan was not even worth mentioning, it was just an undeserved reputation. What qualifications does he have to be compared with the Divine Eagle of the Grasslands? Solitary Eagle snorted twice. Senior's words make sense. I heard that Solitary Eagle often goes to the Great Snowy Mountains to practice his martial arts, and fights with thousands of vultures. If this rumor is true, then the tenacity of the divine eagle of the grasslands is commendable. June Moxie's face was heavy, but there was a hint of worship in it. From this point of view, Solitary Eagle indeed has the qualifications to be above Feng Wanyan. He is worthy of being called the supreme master of the grasslands. Solitary Eagle couldn't help but be pleased with this affirmation, and praised, "I didn't expect a kid like you to be able to name all 8 grandmasters. You have some knowledge." Chapter 163. The prince and Song Laosan were silently cursing in their hearts. Didn't I just say that this is something that anyone in this continent would know? How could it be said that he has some knowledge? Does this even need to be known? Besides, the solitary eagle of the savannah has been battling the snow mountain eagles for many years, but the fierce Gale swordsman, Feng Wanyan, has annihilated the prairie wolves many times, and his battle record is not inferior to that of the solitary eagle. How could this be an undeserved reputation? However, the two of them were also shrewd people. From the conversation between June Moxie and the solitary eagle, they could tell that something was amiss. When they thought of the 8 great grandmasters, how would they dare to raise any objections? Other than the 8 great grandmasters, there is also the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan. Speaking of this name, June Moxie couldn't help but be fascinated. Just what kind of outstanding assassin would be able to be called the supreme assassin? I wonder if his strength is stronger than the evil monarch in my previous life? I'm really curious. Thinking of this, June Moxie's heart was filled with a strong desire to fight. As the saying goes, a mountain cannot contain 2 tigers. In the same profession, there naturally cannot be 2 supreme assassins. In the profession of assassins, this is even more so. And June Moxie, the peerless evil monarch who occupied the throne of the world's #1 assassin in his previous life, would he be able to tolerate someone suppressing him? The answer is naturally no. At this moment, June Moxie suddenly had a faint feeling that sooner or later, he and the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan, would have a battle. This seemed to be a fated battle, and it was inevitable. Young man, although you're quite knowledgeable, but this old man still doesn't agree with what you've just said. The solitary falcon's tone had obviously softened a lot even though he was still questioning him. This point is easy to explain. Why did I mention that the solitary eagle fought with thousands of vultures in the snowy mountains? That's the truth. June Moxie said with a sigh, as everyone knows, the vultures on the snowy peak are not ordinary vultures. They are real mystical beasts. Although their level is slightly lower, the attack power of thousands of low-level mystical beasts is enough to cause a qualitative change. We all know that by practicing and fighting in that place, one can cultivate the Xian Qi within one's body and continuously grow. Just the bone-piercing cold is enough to push one's Xian Qi to progress step by step. Moreover, he had to deal with so many vultures at the same time. If he was able to emerge victorious in the end, then he would surely be able to greatly increase his combat experience. Moreover, you can observe the flight path of the vultures and their attacks, and comprehend your own moves from them. The solitary falcon nodded with a smile on his face as he listened to June Moxie's explanation. Yes, this is indeed a good idea. Looking at the expression on his face, June Moxie suddenly had the urge to spit on his face. Look at you, you're so proud of yourself. No matter what, you're still a great master of your generation. Can't you be a little more reserved? Everyone here can see that you are the solitary eagle, the god of the grassland eagle. And you are still pretending to be mysterious. Of course, that little rascal, Yang Imo, is an exception. June Moxie suddenly realized something. So, whether it was an ordinary person or an official, whether it was a gangster or a grandmaster, they all like to be flattered. Look at this guy in front of me, how comfortable is he being slapped by me? I wonder if this is the Charles de Gaulle of this world. Therefore, although the solitary eagle's practice process is extremely dangerous, and there is always the possibility of dying in the eagle's belly, it is a shortcut to practice martial arts. As the saying goes, fortune comes from danger. Solitary eagle is worthy of being a grandmaster if he can think of this. June Moxie resisted the urge to vomit in his heart. He praised enthusiastically and slapped the eagle without hesitation. Although this thing was a little disgusting, it was cheap and did not cost a penny. Solitary Eagle smiled with relief. He knew his own situation. Although his efforts were not recognized by others, it would be a lie to say that he was not happy to be praised like this today. But June Moxie stopped before going too far. He quickly changed the topic. Since this is a shortcut to success, there are so many smart people in the world. Don't you think others have not thought of this? In fact, I believe that Solitary Eagle is not the only one who has practiced martial arts on the snowy peak since ancient times. But only Solitary Eagle has become one of the 8 grandmasters. The others are unknown. What does this mean? Solitary Eagle was slapped all over. He blurted out, because those people are all dead. The solitary falcon couldn't help but sigh as he thought of the piles of bones buried on the snowy peak. However, he was feeling proud at the same time. Yes. What this senior said is very correct. June Moxie praised without restraint. A shortcut is never the same as a smooth road. Those people are all dead. Their bones are buried in the snowy peak. They have even become vultures' food. Not even their bones are left. Although they have found the right direction and chosen the right method, they are also extremely persistent. It can even be said that each of them is more persistent than Solitary Eagle, because they have been persistent until the moment of their own death. But the world only knows Solitary Eagle. Few people know who they are. That is why Solitary Eagle practicing martial arts on the snowy peak is a legend, not any of their names. There is only one reason. Because Solitary Eagle succeeded. They failed. It's that simple. June Moxie smiled. The anecdotes of the so-called successful people become inspirational stories not because of the stories themselves, but because the protagonists of these stories have finally achieved success. That is why there are stories. But at the same time, people who have the same experience as them, or are even more persistent and hardworking than them, can also become stories. Their experiences are even more tragic and shocking. But because they failed in the end, they are buried. Everyone can have a story. Everyone can even become a legend. But there must be a prerequisite: you must first succeed. Wealth is a kind of physical enjoyment, but poverty is a kind of spiritual enjoyment. The only difference is that only the rich who have worked hard from poverty are qualified to enjoy poverty. And the poverty of the poor is just suffering. June Moxie said so much in one breath. He felt a little thirsty. He grabbed the teapot and gulped down a big mouthful of tea. But no one felt that his action was rude. On the contrary, everyone had a thoughtful look on their faces as they slowly digested the deeper meaning of his words. In the end, even though Old Song worked hard, sacrificed a lot, and was persistent, his wine may be good in the eyes of ordinary people, but it may not be the best. June Moxie had finally returned to the topic of conversation. His speech had praised the solitary falcon, but had also ended up hammering Old Song's body. It could be said that June Moxie's big circle was extremely ingenious. When June Moxie first saw Solitary Eagle, he had already started to suspect his identity. June Moxie was able to confirm that Old Song's cultivation was at the Sky Xian level, but he was able to confirm that Old Song was at the middle level of Sky Xian. He then used the matter of the 8 great grandmasters to test the waters. When it came to the fight between Solitary Eagle and Feng Huanyun, from Solitary Eagle's reaction, there was no longer any suspense. This person was Solitary Eagle. This was something that even the prince and Old Song could see. If June Moxie still couldn't see it, he might as well buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. The most wonderful thing was that the solitary falcon had been concealing his identity all along, and hadn't revealed his identity at all. However, June Moxie had begun to flatter him even before he had revealed his identity. And this had made the solitary falcon very happy. If it was a Xian Qi expert like Old Song who said these words, the effect would be far inferior to June Moxie's. This was because June Moxie's performance right now was that of a lousy character. Such a character was actually able to judge the outcome of the fight between Solitary Eagle and Feng Huanyun in such a fair manner. If that was the case, then wouldn't the others have a better idea of the outcome? How could Solitary Eagle, who had never defeated Feng Wanyan in his entire life and had always been in a draw, not feel happy? Looking at him, squinting his eyes and nodding his head vigorously, it was enough to prove the power of Jun Moxie's words. The more I look at this brat, the more I find him pleasing to the eye. Just as you said, whether a wine is good or bad, we still have to taste it and not boast about it. Old Song was a little depressed. He took out his wine and recounted his experience, gaining the unanimous approval of the crowd. Not to mention, if they were to compete in drinking at that time, even if the taste of the wine was the same, but with his foreshadowing, the victory would definitely belong to him. As for this brat, not only was he late, the moment he came in, his words had already caused the heavens to be angry and the people to resent him. But after talking about all sorts of nonsense, he actually managed to change the direction of the wind. Although what he said did make some sense, on the surface, it seemed that the two of them did not mention competing in drinking, but in reality, the moment Old Song brought up the origin of his wine, the competition had already begun. And Jun Moxie's words were like a counterattack, completely destroying the slight advantage that Old Song had had. This was creating momentum. But at the same time, Jun Moxie was also pursuing the greatest benefit. This was the Prairie Eagle god, Solitary Eagle. In the current turbulent times in Tianxiang City, Solitary Eagle's attitude was enough to turn the situation around. Moreover, Jun Moxie intended to find out how to use the Xian Dan from Solitary Eagle's mouth, and slowly lay the foundation. Not bad, not bad. Wine tasting is the most important thing right now. Who is better, who is worse, who is the winner, and who is the loser, we will know once we taste it. The prince laughed heartily. Compared to Old Song, he was relatively calm in the face of Solitary Eagle's prestige. After all, he was a member of the imperial family. Even though the Solitary Falcon's name had shaken the world, but he was in a different circle. So, he might admire him, but he didn't have much of a feeling towards him. Even if he did feel something, there was nothing he could do. How could a person like Solitary Eagle be ordered around by any country's emperor? In other words, if the Solitary Falcon wanted to kill him, then it wouldn't matter if he was prepared or not, or even if he was prepared for it. So, it would be difficult for him to escape death. So, it would be better to let nature take its course, and not deliberately offend him. Thinking this way, he naturally calmed down. Yes, persistence does not necessarily guarantee success. But success is bound to be persistent. The Solitary Falcon closed his eyes and pondered for a long time. Then, he slowly said these words with a sigh, "After listening to your words, I realize that it's completely unnecessary to admire a person because of something." Ha! Jun Moxie was a little surprised. He didn't think that his words would make this Solitary Eagle so obstinate and self-opinionated. Even though he was thinking this in his heart, he still said, "Yes, we only need to be clear about our goals, and move forward step by step. As for whether our predecessors fell, and whether our descendants can keep up, we don't need to worry about it. Because what we are most concerned about is whether we can climb to the peak, and nothing else." Well said. Solitary Eagle laughed. What we are most concerned about is whether we can climb to the peak, and nothing else. Just for this one sentence, I'm willing to float a big white wine. Jun Moxie laughed, and gestured for Old Song's wine to be tasted first. This action caused the prince and the others to be startled. First impressions are the most important thing when tasting wine and food. A person's intuition, especially in this kind of intense competition, is even more important. If two wines with the same taste and ingredients were to compete, then the one who drank it first would definitely win. Could it be that he was really that confident? Everyone looked at Jun Moxie, and a big question mark rose in their hearts. Old Song did not hesitate, and with a wave of his hand, a faint blue light flashed, and 4 wine cups fell at the same time, quietly placed in front of everyone. This skill was like the floating clouds and flowing water, extremely natural and unrestrained, causing the little heir Yang Mo's big eyes to be filled with worship. The mud seal was opened, and the rich wine fragrance instantly filled the air. The prince and solitary eagle couldn't help but close their eyes and take a deep breath. These two were wine lovers, and also people who had tasted the world's best wine. There was nothing they could do about it. One was a prince of a country, and the other was a grandmaster. If they wanted to drink, what kind of wine couldn't they drink? Before tasting wine, taste the fragrance. It really is a top-quality wine. The solitary falcon said faintly, "You're indeed worthy of being called the Grandmaster of Wine. You've spent many years on this wine, and just the smell of it is enough to make people feel relaxed and happy. Among all the wines I've tasted, there are at most 2 or 3 that can compare." June Moxie frowned. Although this wine's fragrance was mellow, it was too strong. It was like a high-grade perfume. If a little bit was sprinkled on the body, it would be enough to attract people's imagination, and make them appear noble and elegant. But if a whole bottle was sprinkled on the body, it would be pungent and disgusting, and it would become cliché. Song Shang held up the wine jar with both hands, his expression solemn, and his face filled with a sacred expression. A blue light flashed, and mysterious energy passed through the bottom of the jar. Under the stimulation, a bright arrow of wine flew out, falling straight into a white jade wine cup, filling it to the brim, and not a single drop spilled out. Then came the second wine cup, all 4 cups were filled to the brim, and the arrow of wine seemed to never stop flowing, creating a gorgeous and fragrant rainbow in the air, but not a single drop spilled out of the cup. Chapter 164. Song Shang loved to compete in drinking. In his entire life, he had competed with other wine lovers dozens of times. Old Song was confident that he had tempered himself 1,000 times. Even when there were hundreds of people present at the same time and everyone was watching, Song Shang was always calm and composed. Because he had absolute confidence in himself. "My wine is definitely unrivaled in this world. No one can defeat me." But this time, Song Shang found himself feeling nervous. It was a kind of unintentional nervousness, an inexplicable nervousness, and his heart was filled with apprehension. The youth in front of him had an unremarkable appearance, and could even be said to have a sloppy look on his face, but he was actually giving off an invisible pressure. He squinted his eyes and looked at the 2 ordinary small jars of wine on the side. Could it be that there's really some exceptional wine in there? Or perhaps it could be said that this drinking competition was the smallest in history, but the scale of this drinking competition was unprecedented. Although there were only 2 judges, one of them was the younger brother of the emperor of Tianxiang Empire, and was worthy of the name of the emperor. And the other person was one of the few masters who stood at the peak of the Xian continent. Moreover, the only spectator was a crown prince of a prince's mansion. As for the stakes of this bet, it was unprecedented. Song Shang was not only betting his own reputation, but also his freedom for the rest of his life. "If I lose, I'm willing to take him as my master." These words were borne out by a prince, and a Xian expert. Who would dare to let a Sky Xian expert, Song Shang, take an ordinary youngster as his master if it was an ordinary person? Who would dare to let a Sky Xian expert, Song Shang, take an ordinary youth as his master? What a ridiculous thing to do! This was a blasphemy against the dignity of the Tianxian experts. Even before they could say anything, they would have already been torn to pieces. But in the face of these 2, who would dare to say no? Even if the emperors of the various empires were here, they would still have to give face to this. They might not give face to the prince, but who would dare to not give face to the solitary eagle, the god of grassland eagle? Even Yun Bichen, who was ranked first among the supreme Xian, would have to think twice before offending the solitary eagle. Therefore, for Song Shang, intentionally or unintentionally, he had walked into a steep cliff. This battle was like riding a tiger, with their backs against the river. "Good wine." The prince gently raised the wine cup and took a sip. He let the wine tumble in his mouth, touching every part of his mouth that could absorb the taste. When his mouth was full of fragrance, he swallowed it in one gulp. Gently closing his eyes, he carefully savored the wonderful feeling brought by this exquisite wine. Not bad indeed. Not only is the aroma of the wine alluring, the taste of the wine is even purer, and there is a leisurely feeling of intoxication. This old man has tasted many fine wines in the past, but none of them can compare to this wine. It is truly of the highest quality. Solitary Eagle downed the wine in one gulp. There was a trace of surprise in his sharp eagle eyes. No wonder Song Shang was so confident and dared to gamble so much. This wine was indeed not bad. All the wines that he had tasted before, whether it was the royal wine of the various kingdoms or the tribute wine of the grassland, were all overshadowed by this wine and could not be mentioned in the same breath. June Moxie smiled and gently shook the wine cup. The originally clear wine became blurred under the shake, and a few bubbles appeared on the surface of the wine. Looking closely, the originally clear wine had become slightly cloudy. It's still not professional enough. June Moxie shook his head and sighed, the impurities cannot be removed. This is the biggest taboo in wine brewing. Song Shang held his breath and his eyes were wide open. His best work, which he had poured years of energy, effort, and blood into, actually received an unprofessional evaluation. Should he scold this kid for being too ignorant or too arrogant? After drinking 2 cups of wine each, the prince and Solitary Eagle's eyes simultaneously glanced at the 2 jars of wine that had yet to be finished. Their eyes showed that they were ready to eat. Anyone could see that once the competition was over, these 2 men would immediately start eating. Little brother, we should take a look at your wine. Let's finish this quickly so that we can drink to our heart's content. Today, we were able to taste such good wine. This trip was truly not in vain. The prince smiled warmly. His words showed that he was very optimistic about Old Song's wine. From time to time, the corner of his eyes would glance at the 2 jars of wine that Song Shang was holding. The prince's meaning was very clear. I will directly say that Old Song's wine is good. If you, Solitary Eagle, say it again, you will be 1 step behind me. After all, the wine is Old Song's and is not something that can be given to him for free. Otherwise, Solitary Eagle will shamelessly steal the wine and leave. If that happens, I won't be able to drink anymore. Old Song had said that these were the last 2 jars of wine. As for the winner between the 2, the result was already very clear. What else was there to say? The wine that Song Shang brought out today was much better than the wine that he had been selling before. One must know that the wine that he sold before was already very rare in this world, let alone today's wine. Solitary Eagle always wanted to maintain his identity as an expert. He couldn't be like the prince and ignore his face. Although he didn't say anything, he looked at June Moxie with eyes that conveyed the same meaning. It's still too early to say that. The winner hasn't been decided yet. How can we know whose wine is better? June Moxie said calmly. He bent over and picked up one of his jars. Then, he slapped it down without a care in the world, bang. The 3 men's eyes twitched. Even little Yang Imo, who didn't know what was going on, opened his eyes wide and his mouth wide. His face was filled with nervousness. Ha! The 3 men said at the same time. The smell was still the same. There wasn't any enticing aroma. Normally, when the mud seal was removed, the aroma of the wine should have gushed out. But why wasn't there any aroma? Could it be that this kid was really a wax spear with a silver appearance? The 3 men took a closer look and couldn't help but get angry. They saw that after the mud seal was removed by June Moxie, there was actually a thin layer of oiled paper that tightly wrapped around the mouth of the jar. It would be strange if there was any aroma. They watched as June Imo Xia unhurriedly removed the oiled paper bit by bit. This made the 3 of them blush to their ears. They wished that they could pull this brat down, and tear off the oiled paper themselves to reveal the wine. This was too tantalizing. The oiled paper was finally removed, but there was still no aroma. Solitary Eagle and the other 2 men's eyes widened at the same time. There was actually a layer of Xian beast skin under the oiled paper. From the looks of it, it should be the skin of a 6th-level Xian beast. The Xian beast skin was naturally easier to handle. With a slight movement from all 4 sides, it was peeled off. But what happened next made the three of them have the urge to curse at the same time. Under the Xian beast skin, there was actually a thick piece of white-orange wood, pressing on the jar lid. White-orange wood didn't have any smell, but it was able to isolate any aroma from leaking out. No wonder they couldn't smell the wine. But looking at the small jar, before they could even smell the aroma of the wine, it had actually shrunk to half its original size. This kid was too much, wasn't he? What was even more excessive was, Jun Moxie actually stopped at this crucial moment. He stood up and slowly took 2 steps forward. He opened his arms and did 2 extreme chest expansion movements. He then took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. He put his hands on his hips and stretched his waist a few times. He shook his buttocks, then shook his head and twisted his neck. He interlaced his 10 fingers and exerted strength. Suddenly, the joints of his fingers made a series of popping sounds. Wang Yi, Song Shang, and Solitary Eagle were dumbfounded. In an instant, the 3 of them had the same impulse. Why don't you let me twist your neck? I'll definitely twist it for you. Little Yang Imo was still the most childish. He really wanted to ask this big brother if he was feeling uncomfortable. After posing for a while and doing a few movements, Jun Dashao swayed his buttocks and took a catwalk. He then walked over and placed his hand on the white-orange wood. He effortlessly took it down and threw it to the ground with a clang sound. In the midst of the silence, this sound was extremely loud and clear. It made the eyebrows of the 3 men, who had always boasted that they wouldn't bat an eyelid even in the face of a landslide, twitch at the same time. Jun Moxie's hand was already on the lid of the wine jar. At this moment, there was already a faint fragrance of wine wafting out. It made the 3 men's hearts itch unbearably. Hurry up and open it, hurry up and open it. Get drunk before drinking, open the jar and the fragrance will spread 10 miles, fuck me. The 3 men couldn't bear it anymore and cursed out loud. Even the self-proclaimed expert Solitary Eagle was no exception. No, it should be said that this man's reaction could be said to be the most intense. It was as if he was about to make a move to kill Jun Dashao. This guy's level of pretentiousness had reached its limit. It was intolerable. However, the 3 men stopped cursing at the same time. Their anger instantly froze on their faces. Because at this moment, Jun Moxie used an extremely direct method. With a smack, he directly smashed the lid of the wine jar away. Boom! An indescribable fragrance instantly filled the small room. It was as if a ruler had suddenly descended with the aura of a monarch descending upon the world. Or rather, it should be like the omnipresent moonlight at night. Without anyone noticing, it had already sprinkled its gentle radiance over every corner of the earth. This was a dreamlike transcendent smell. When this fragrance wafted out, this place was no longer the human world, but a fairyland. No! Even a fairyland would not have such a wonderful smell. The 3 of them moaned in pleasure at the same time. Suddenly, they felt as if they were floating in this intoxicating wine aroma. They kept on rising, and rising. Was this still wine? How could there be such a wine in this world that could bring one into a fairyland with just its fragrance? Sob sob. I am so touched. By the time the 3 of them came back to their senses, Junimo Xia had already filled the 4 cups in front of him with good wine. The slightly amber-colored sake was poured into the white jade cups. Just by looking at the color, it had a kind of magical power that made people immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. Before drinking, one is already drunk. 10 miles of fragrance. The prince forgot himself and stood up. Suddenly, his eyes were filled with hot tears. He used all his strength and roared with a trembling body, "It's more than 10 li." Old Song held the wine cup with tears in his eyes as if he had found a treasure. He looked at it carefully for a long time, unwilling to drink it. That was because he was really afraid. He wasn't afraid of losing this battle. He was afraid that the wine would only be fragrant and would lose its transcendent quality after drinking it. Chapter 165. The solitary falcon was worthy of being called a great master of the world. He was still as calm as ever, and his body was as still as a rock. However, his originally expressionless face had already begun to blush uncontrollably. His eyes flashed. He picked up the wine glass and slowly brought it to his mouth. After a moment of hesitation, he tilted his head back and drank it in one gulp. A clear and mellow feeling slid down his throat, and the solitary falcon silently circulated his xian qi. He clearly felt the wine flow into his stomach, and then he was surprised to find that there was still wine in his mouth. He swallowed once more, but found that he still hadn't drunk all the wine, so he swallowed again. Chinese fine wine, passed down among the people. Good wine, even after 3 swallows, there would still be a lingering fragrance in the throat. The solitary falcon was in the middle of enjoying himself when he suddenly felt as if a raging fire had started to burn in his stomach. In fact, this fire had started to spread throughout his limbs and bones, and had even started to burn his blood vessels and meridians. In an instant, Solitary Eagle felt that his blood vessels were expanding. It was as if his hair was standing on end. He tried hard to exercise his qi so that he would not make a fool of himself in front of everyone. However, the burning heat was still flowing in his body. It was still burning, and it was still surging left and right. If there was an opponent here, at this moment, Solitary Eagle even felt that he could challenge Yun Bichen, who was ranked first in Xinxian. Good wine. This is the best wine in the world. Solitary Eagle tried hard to control his urge to roar. He tried hard to suppress himself. In the end, he couldn't control himself. It was as if he roared from his throat, from the depths of his heart. Although his voice was low, everyone could hear the excitement in it. This is the wine a man should drink. After a long while, he finally got up as if he was sleepwalking. He turned around and floated down. After a long time, he lowered his head and looked at the empty wine cup in his hand. Tears silently flowed down his cheeks. Today, I know that I have lived in vain for the past few decades. All of a sudden, he leaped up in an excited state. His arms danced in the air with great force. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. After jumping around for a while, he returned to the table and sat down. He moaned, "Good wine, ah ah." Song Shang's body trembled uncontrollably. He still held the wine glass in his hand, but he didn't drink it. However, when he saw His Highness and Solitary Eagle's reaction, he knew that he had lost. He lost without any suspense. But this time, especially at this moment, he was incomparably excited to lose, elated to lose. He had no regrets losing to a wine of higher quality. What's more, he was about to personally taste the true taste of this fine wine. At this moment, Song Shang didn't care about winning or losing anymore. He only wanted to taste the wine in his hand with great sincerity. Gulping it down in one gulp, Song Shang clearly felt that his soul was dancing, and his mind was singing. Every inch of his muscles, every meridian, and every drop of blood in his body was trembling comfortably, moaning in satisfaction. After a long time, Song Shang's eyes were suddenly filled with tears. His throat started to sob. His tears fell into the white jade wine cup. He cried even more miserably. In the end, his body trembled and he couldn't speak properly. He suddenly leaned on the table and bawled. I can drink such a good wine today. I have no regrets in this life, to have the opportunity to taste such a good wine. I, Song Shang, can die without regrets. Old Song punched the table again and again, then punched his head again and again. He tore at his hair and wailed, "The first half of my life. I lived like a dog." Ugh, Jun Mo Xia was flabbergasted. He couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. Goosebumps covered his entire body. It's not that he hasn't seen people cry. It's not that he hasn't seen men cry. However, the man who was crying in front of him was enough to shock Jun Moxie. This was an old man who was over 50 years old. He was also an intermediate Tian Shen expert. Moreover, he was a famous assassin who made people tremble in fear. But now, he was crying so sadly because of a cup of wine. He looked at the prince again. He was in a daze, as if he was suffering from epilepsy. Solitary Eagle's face was as red as a date, as if he had turned into a statue. Is it worth it? Isn't it just a cup of wine? June Moxie was puzzled. Hitman June had underestimated the power of China's fine wine. Ever since Yu the Great brewed the first sorghum wine, it has undergone 5,000 years of precipitation and tempering. Countless people went crazy over the word of wine, as if they were possessed. Wine is like a poem, like a painting, like an immortal, like a dream, like an intoxicated person, like a fog, like lightning. Generation after generation, the technology of winemaking has undergone countless changes. June Moxie had the complete technology, so he felt that winemaking was easy. However, he had neglected the fact that he was standing on the shoulders of countless giants of the Chinese civilization. The people who had participated in the wine revolution, from ancient times to modern times, were standing on each other's shoulders, and were at least 3 times taller than Mount Everest. The winemaking process that June Dashao had mastered was the result of 5,000 years of tempering and tempering. It may seem simple, but the sages of the past had put in a lot of effort to complete this simple process. In this world that was not even comparable to the ancient times of China, he was suddenly able to taste modern China's wine. What kind of impact was this? This was simply indescribable. Old Song's Xian Qi cultivation had long since reached the middle of the Tian Xian realm, and was considered to be one of the top experts in the world. This was a level that ordinary people would find difficult to reach, but he didn't pay much attention to it. In fact, he had almost reached the point where he loved nothing but wine. If he hadn't devoted almost all of his life's energy to wine, then his achievements in martial arts would have been far greater than this. Old Song had once lamented over his obsession with wine, but at the same time, he also felt gratified. He believed that he had reached the pinnacle of the way of wine, and had always been confident and conceited. But today, he had suddenly discovered a wine that was many times better than his own. In Old Song's heart, how could he just be shocked? At this moment, in his eyes, June Moxie wasn't just a mountain that he could look up to, he was simply incomparably tall, incomparably majestic. This young man was simply the incarnation of the god of wine. Heavens! There is actually such a good wine in this world. There is actually someone in this world who can brew such a good wine. If this person isn't the god of wine, then what is he? He had thoroughly defeated a person in his most prideful domain. This was tantamount to destroying Old Song's life's perseverance. His spiritual pillar had been destroyed. The small tavern was silent for a long time, and then the 4 people looked at each other. His Highness was the first to speak. Today's wine competition. His voice was still tinged with excitement. But before he could finish, Old Song interrupted him. I am ashamed. What wine competition is there to talk about? My wine, compared to this young master's wine, is just like what he said before, trash. I, Song Shang, have traveled all over the world, but I never knew that there was such a wine in this world. Song Shang's voice became more and more excited, louder and louder. Song Shang, am convinced. Then, he stood up, and his eyes flickered with fanaticism. He arrived in front of June Mo Xia, and suddenly bent his knees. He knelt down, and heavily kowtowed to the ground. Master, please accept this disciple's worship. June Moxie hurriedly stood up. His Highness and Solitary Eagle looked at each other in dismay. After a long time, Solitary Eagle said, if you agree to the bet, you must accept the loss. Song Shang has acknowledged this young man as his master. With this young man's wine-making skills, it is not a disgrace to him. Not to mention, it is not a disgrace. The hammer was the final word. June Moxie thought for a long time, and then finally smiled. Not bad. If that's the case, Old Song, you can get up. I will accept you as my disciple. What is this? Who said that there can't be a free lunch in the sky? Isn't this a free lunch from the sky? His Highness was treating this matter as a joke. He wanted to see how Old Song would go back on his words. He was a dignified Sky Xian expert and one of the top assassins in the world. How could he accept the former's joking wager as his master? Isn't this too much of a joke? becoming the disciple of a master was a major event of one's life. In this day and age, the heaven, earth, monarch, and master are the 5 cardinal virtues of human relations. Although the word master is the last, it is the most authoritative of the 5, even more so than the monarch and monarch. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Parents shape one's body, but the master is the one who guides one's life. With Song Shang's status and identity, how could he accept a nameless youth as his master? His Highness obviously underestimated old Song's obsession with wine. There is no seniority in learning, only those who have mastered it. In order to understand the true meaning of wine, what's the harm in accepting a master? To be honest, Jun Dashao was also quite surprised. He was just thinking if old Song reneged on his words, should he ridicule him a bit, or should he do him a favor, pretending to be magnanimous and let him off easily? He didn't expect that old Song would, but young Master Jun was definitely not going to reject it pretentiously. There is a free fighter like Tian Xian, it would be a waste not to accept him. If he didn't accept him, then he would be a real fool. Even though this Tian Xian expert only wanted to learn winemaking from him, even though this Tian Xian expert is very mysterious, and even though this Tian Xian expert can't be trusted, and even though this Tian Xian expert, who cares so much? As long as you become my subordinate, you won't be able to run away. Jun Mo Xia was very excited. He suddenly realized that he was now a teacher. So, he should have the obligation to educate his disciple. The young Master Jun was fully deserving of the title of Soul Engineer in a split second. In fact, he felt that it was his duty to educate his disciple. I say, old Song, do you know why you lost? Jun Moxie wanted to stroke his beard in order to make himself look like a person of virtue and prestige, but halfway through, he remembered that although he will definitely have it in the future, he doesn't have it right now. So he put down his hand and pretended to pat the dust off his leg. Chapter 166. Master's wine is a heavenly wine, a celestial wine. Unparalleled, this disciple's cultivation is insignificant, naturally I will lose, and I will concede defeat. Song Shang's tone was full of respect. It's still the same saying, learning doesn't matter before or after, the accomplished is the teacher. In the field of winemaking, the other party's achievements are indeed much, much higher than his own. Song Shang didn't feel the slightest shameful that he acknowledged this youth as his master, on the contrary, he felt very honored, very excited, and even very excited. You could have gone further, and you have indeed paid a lot for wine. But you are wrong in that you stopped moving forward. Jun Moxie was not polite and said, you opened your mouth and said that the wine you brewed decades ago is your peak, the world's best wine. Why does it sound so imposing? But it's this one sentence that has blocked your own path forward, completely ruining the possibility of advancing further in your future. The moment you brewed these 2 jars of wine and stopped satisfied, you have already lost to yourself, lost to the self who boasted of being at the peak. When Song Shang heard this, it was as if he was suddenly enlightened, and cold sweat suddenly dripped down his forehead. Yes, ever since he brewed this batch of wine in the past, there has not been the slightest bit of improvement. Instead, every day he was complacent, thinking that no one in the world could surpass him. Who would have thought that he had already been defeated, just like Xian Qi? If there is a person who thinks, I reached the Earth Xian realm 3 years ago, and the speed of advancement is unprecedented, advancing to the Tian Xian realm is only a matter of time. Then this person may not be able to break through the Tian Xian realm in his lifetime, and reach a higher realm. But Xian Qi is related to the life of yourself and your family, there is pressure, so you do not slack off in the slightest. Although the advancement is slow, you can continue to advance. But winemaking is different, you are not persistent enough. Otherwise, even if you lose today's competition, you won't lose so powerlessly. Jun Moxie said sincerely, so, be persistent. Song Shang accepted his master's teachings wholeheartedly and lowered his head to accept the lesson. However, Solitary Eagle and Wang Yi started to look down on him. This idiot was so eloquent that persistence isn't the most important thing. But now, in the blink of an eye, he's overthrown my own conclusion. This kind of ability to turn hostile faster than flipping a book, it was really worth it. Their eyes fell on June Moxie's 2 jars of wine at the same time. Each of them gulped down a mouthful of saliva. Using the most ordinary ingredients to brew the best wine is the true way of brewing wine, June Moxie said leisurely. Just like martial arts in the world, using the most ordinary moves to unleash the greatest power is the true pinnacle of martial arts. Hearing this, Solitary Eagle was stunned. Those who did not have a high enough level of Xian cultivation might not be able to understand this sentence, but for a master like Solitary Eagle, this sentence was enough to enlighten even the deaf. Just like throwing a punch, what kind of punch was the most powerful? That was an ordinary black tiger steel's heart, which could bring out the greatest strength of one's entire body. Even if one's fist was fancy and flowery, or if one could hit the enemy easily, the strength of this punch would be far inferior to a simple black tiger steel's heart. It could even be as different as heaven and earth. In a duel between experts, life and death could be decided in an instant. The difference of one move was the boundary between life and death. Black Tiger Steel's heart was undoubtedly a concentrated move, and it was the best among all the moves. However, there was always a prerequisite, and that was to hit the enemy. How could such a simple move hit the enemy who was agile? Solitary Eagle seemed to feel that there was an inexplicable idea in his mind that was about to break free from its shackles and jump out. Once this idea became clear, Solitary Eagle was sure that he would improve. And it would be a huge improvement. But helplessly, he could not understand it no matter what he said. He could not help but frown and think hard. June Moxie's intentional or unintentional words had pushed this grandmaster to the brink of a breakthrough. By the time Solitary Eagle awoke from his deep thoughts, the prince could not wait any longer. "Little brother, this wine, hee, how much do you have left? Is it?" "Oh, brother, don't ask about this first. I've said before that this wine costs 10,000 taels of silver per jar. What do you think? Is it worth it?" June Moxie did not bat an eyelid as he threw out his bait. "It's worth it." Before the prince could speak, Song Shang had already opened his mouth and said with a regretful tone, "Such a rare heavenly wine cannot be measured with gold and silver. That would only be a blasphemy against this wine. Not to mention 10,000 taels of silver, even 10,000 taels of gold per jar would be worth it." In his eyes, this wine was no longer wine, but a treasure of art. It was a priceless treasure. It could even be said that it was priceless. "In my opinion, it's worth it. This wine is 100 times better than the wine that old Song San sold before." The prince answered June Moxie's question and sighed, "However, I'm afraid it won't be easy to sell it for 10,000 taels of silver per jar." How could it be easy? It was very difficult. The prince's words were already very subtle. "Is it difficult? Since it's difficult, then I won't sell it at retail. I might as well sell it in limited quantities. Perhaps I can sell it for a good price." June Moxie smiled as he tactfully and subtly proposed his idea. The three of them fell silent. They were all outstanding people and instantly understood June Dashao's intention. They couldn't help but think to themselves, "Good idea. If it's an auction, when will it start? And where will it be held?" The prince asked impatiently. This was what he was most concerned about. "That's right, where can I buy such a fine wine?" The price was secondary. Old Song San will naturally know about this when the time comes. Song Shang will participate in the auction of my wine. June Moxie might not trust Song Shang in other matters, but when it came to selling wine, he was 100% confident. Song Shang could betray anyone, but he would never betray wine. June Moxie was very sure of this. "That's great." The prince clapped his hands excitedly. "If there are any difficulties, this old man can also join in. In this Tianxiang city, there aren't many things that this old man can't do. It would be wonderful if he could join in and buy a favor, or if he could drink this wine often in the future." These were his true thoughts. In the end, this prince was also someone who loved wine. "Master, this is the current prince equivalent, Yang Huainong, He is also the only brother of the emperor of the Tian-Xiang Empire. The prince's words were very obvious, so Song Shang immediately introduced him. As the saying goes, the poor do not fight with the rich, and the common people do not fight with the officials. This was a prince, so it would be best not to offend him. Prince equivalent. Jun Moxie had already guessed that this guy's background was not small, but he had not expected that he would be the only prince of the Tian-Xiang Empire. He was slightly startled, but immediately calmed down. Sorry for not recognizing you. Everyone thought that he would be shocked, and even pay his respects. After all, in the eyes of these three people, Jun Xia was nothing more than a humble scholar. At most, he had a bit of pride, and nothing more. But no matter how much pride he had, how could he not be excited when he saw the current prince, who could help him achieve meteoric success in a short period of time? It could even be considered proper etiquette to greet each other with great respect. Learning both civil and military skills, and selling them to the emperor. But this kid's eyes did not even waver, as if he did not see the prince's obvious hint of wanting to help him. Although his mouth said that he was sorry for being disrespectful, his words did not contain the slightest bit of respect. But they did not know that this youth in front of them, whether it was in his previous life or this life, did not care about a prince. Just a few days ago, he had publicly acted like a hooligan in front of the emperor's son. If not for the fact that this prince was pleasing to the eye, Jun Moxie was afraid that he would have flipped out as well. What's so great about a prince? If you want to drink my wine, then you have to follow the rules, otherwise, there's no need to talk. If there is a need, I will be very happy to cooperate with you. Jun Moxie smiled faintly, and said very politely. This tone was very obviously not enthusiastic. He would only cooperate if there was a need. If there was no need, that would be best. Prince equivalent Yang Huainong was not offended and laughed heartily. He squinted his eyes and said, although it is not convenient for this old man to personally appear, this old man will definitely not sit by and watch such a good wine be buried. Jun Moxie had clearly rejected him, but because of this, he became even more interested. How about this? This old man is willing to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver to buy a share and take 10% of the shares. Consider this old man a way out for my descendants. I hope that little brother will agree. Once these words were spoken, everyone present was shocked. First, they were shocked that Prince Equivalent would refer to himself as this old man and not this prince. He actually wanted to buy a share of the wine as a prince. Second, to use 1,000,000 taels of silver to only ask for 10% of the shares, it was obvious that he was very optimistic about the future of this wine. 10% was already 1,000,000 taels of silver, 100% would be 10,000,000 taels of silver, or even more. This old man is nearly 50 years old, and I only have one son and one daughter. The prince chuckled, but his smile was full of mockery. My daughter is all grown up, and if she can find a good husband, then her worries can be considered resolved. But this old man only has this one son, and I do not wish for him to follow in my footsteps. Therefore, I have no choice but to plan ahead and prepare for a rainy day. I hope that young master will give this old man some face. Everyone was silent. The previous emperor had 2 sons, and the older generation of the Tian-Xiang Empire knew about this matter, the crown prince Yang Huaiyu, and the prince equivalent Yang Huainong. Just from the 3 words, prince equivalent, one could see how much the previous emperor doted on his youngest son. Yang Huaiyu was full of ambition, great talent, and brilliant strategy. His military exploits were brilliant, and he had won the hearts of the imperial court. However, the prince equivalent Yang Huainong had always kept a low profile, and never participated in political affairs. He lived his life like a hermit. This was because he knew that no matter how hard he worked, he would never be able to overshadow the genius of his brother, the crown prince. Competing in vain would only ruin himself. Therefore, he had basically withdrawn from the pursuit of power from the very beginning. In addition, he himself was not keen on power. After so many years of indifference, he had cultivated his mind and character, and was even less interested in the affairs of the imperial court. But now that the 3 princes were fighting for the throne, this prince, who had always been indifferent, had begun to plan for his children's future, and even used an identity other than the imperial family to do this. There was a deep meaning behind all of this. Could it be that he did not think highly of any of his 3 nephews? Chapter 167. 1,000,000 taels of silver, 10% of the shares. June Moxie smiled enigmatically. Fine, I find you pleasing to the eye, so I'll let you take advantage of me. A prince, the younger brother of the emperor, offered 1,000,000 taels of silver only for 10% of the wine that he had yet to sell, and this guy actually felt that he had suffered a great loss. June Moxie smiled and lowered his head, saying to little Yang Imo, "Little girl, from now on, you are a shareholder of my wine, we are partners." "I'm really a man." The little fellow screamed, extremely angry, and almost wanted to bite him. We'll talk about this topic later. The matter between a man and a woman can be proven slowly. As for the auction, I will let Song Shang inform everyone. Now that I have something to do, I have to go home quickly. June Moxie wisely chose to leave quickly. A prince of the empire, using an identity other than the imperial family to find a way out for his son, this topic was not only unusually heavy, but also very sensitive. And since Prince Yang Huinong had said this, then he did not intend to hold back any of the rest of the words. But those who listened to his words could be involved in the vortex at any time, even the strong Tian Xian. Song Shang was no exception. As for the currently weaker June Moxie, there was no need to mention, so naturally, he had to leave. Of course, this matter was nothing to the higher level of the Shinxian, the supreme solitary eagle, because the supreme level of the existence of the imperial family. Although Prince Yang's action today was enough to shock most people in the world, it definitely did not include the level of the solitary eagle. In fact, Jun Dashao did not really care that much about this prince equivalence proposal. His partnership with this little child was at best just a casual promise. They saw each other pleasing to the eye, and at the critical moment, he would lend this child a hand, or save his life. For him, it was just a matter of lifting a finger. "Master, don't tell me you don't want me to accompany you?" Song Shang asked respectfully. Both his tone and his eyes were filled with desire. All paths lead to the same destination. The path of martial arts is vast and boundless, and so is the path of wine. You only know that this wine is already an immortal wine, supreme and unsurpassed. But how would you know that these are only 2 jars that I casually took out? To me, this wine is easy to drink, but it can't be considered a fine wine. June Moxie chuckled. Song Shang, even though your identity has been exposed, are you really willing to leave? June Moxie was right. Even though his identity had been exposed, Song Shang would never leave. How could such a heavenly wine be brewed? This had already become Song Shang's lifelong pursuit. Now that it was within his reach, how could Song Shang leave at this critical juncture? He wouldn't leave even if he was chopped into pieces. With that, June Moxie cupped his hands at Solitary Eagle, turned around, and was about to leave. "Wait," the Solitary Falcon shouted in a heavy tone, "Boy, you're done using me, and you're leaving without saying a word. You should know that it's not easy to owe me a debt. Old man, you should know that it's not easy to ask me for a debt. I've never seen anyone ask me for a debt. Especially a debt without any proof." June Moxie looked at him with a smile. "Those who ask me for a debt often end up owing me more, or making me owe them more. Old man, do you want to try?" *T. Solitary Eagle scolded, but there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. "You're still too inexperienced to play tricks on me. No matter what, you must pay me back. Alright, after today, we'll talk again if you can find me." June Moxie's eyes flashed, and he left with a big laugh. "If I can't find you, then I'll owe you." He knows this old man's identity, but he's still able to remain so calm. Moreover, his cultivation is still so low. This is the first person who has ever done this. The prince looked at June Imosie's departing figure with a look of praise in his eyes. This kid is not an ordinary person. What I asked of him today was not in vain. He guessed my identity and still treated me like this. He's also the first. The solitary falcon was also somewhat unhappy. You've already figured out the identities of the three of us, and yet you're still trying to keep it a shitty mystery? You're just pretending to walk away, you're really pretentious. By now, Solitary Eagle had already guessed that his identity must have been guessed by that kid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said so many things to him. But strangely, Solitary Eagle did not feel angry. I know he's trying to flatter me, but I just feel comfortable listening to him. What? Wait. What are you trying to do? The prince shot forward and blocked Song Shang's path, glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. You're that kid's disciple now. Didn't you hear what he said? He took out 2 jars of wine. Doesn't that mean that he can have as much wine as he wants? Besides, he's planning to auction it, so how much will he have? You've already climbed up the tree, and you're still interested in these 2 unsealed jars? This is too much. Old Song actually sneakily took the 2 jars of wine from June Moxie and tried to escape. Can he escape? What if he only has these 2 jars? You're just a judge, and I'm the contestant. What right do you have to take the wine? Song Shang glared at him and argued. In order to compete for the ownership of these 2 jars, his master could also be addressed as Qi. Only the judge has the right to drink. Do you have a problem with that? Solitary Eagle unceremoniously snatched the jars of wine from Song Shang's hands. Now that the competition is over, and you're the owner of the pub, hurry up and prepare a few side dishes to go with our wine. Under Solitary Eagle's pressure, Song Shang dared not say a word. He resentfully turned around and went back inside. Solitary Eagle and the prince looked at each other and smiled. At the same time, they grabbed their wine glasses. The prince couldn't help but sigh. It's good to have absolute power. All kinds of treachery and sophistry are laughable in the face of absolute power. Today, it's an eye-opener. In a corner far away from the pub, a masked woman dressed in black was standing there. Her clothes were fluttering in the wind, and behind her veil was a pair of bright and beautiful eyes. June Moxie, you've humiliated me. Today, you'll pay for it with your life. Don't even mention June Zhantian backing you up. Even if the 8 great masters were to back you up, you would still die tonight. Young miss, it's going to rain. You should go downstairs and take shelter. A masked man dressed in black quietly came up behind her and whispered. No. I want to see June Moxie's body turn into meat paste, and his bones turn into ashes with my own eyes. Only then will I be able to vent the anger in my heart. The woman in black stood there motionlessly. Her voice was as cold as ice. June Moxie must return to the June family's residence to attend the family banquet before it gets dark. This information wasn't easy for us to obtain. We must firmly grasp this opportunity. Yes. The sky hadn't turned dark yet, but the dark clouds in the sky were getting thicker and thicker. The clouds seemed to be getting lower and lower, and the sky was getting darker and darker. Rays of silver light swam through the clouds, and the autumn wind whistled through the sky, bringing with it mournful whistling sounds. There were almost no pedestrians on the streets in such bad weather. The emptiness, coupled with the mournful whistling of the wind in the sky, made it seem like a ghost town. There was still an hour of free time before the time Jun Wui had set for himself to return home. Housekeeper. Family banquet. Jun Moxie was very interested in meeting his sister-in-law's family. So, this was the main reason why he had left the pub. Why does it feel so strange? Jun Moxie was sitting in the palanquin on his way back. He suddenly felt a little uneasy. He had just experienced a great victory, and had even accepted a top expert from Tian Xian as his follower. So, why wasn't he excited at all? Instead, he felt a little absent-minded. There was something wrong with this situation. When was the last time I was flustered? It's really not right. Jun Imo-sia furrowed his brows as he thought of this. He subconsciously felt a chill run down his spine. He rarely had this kind of strange feeling, whether it was in this life or his previous life. But every time he had this feeling, It was always the eve of a great danger. And this uncomfortable feeling had already saved him from death several times. Could it be that there was another danger that could threaten his life approaching? Suddenly, Jun Moxie felt a chill all over his body, and subconsciously fell into the palanquin. His whole body seemed to have turned into a piece of white paper, sticking to the inside of the palanquin. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Dense sounds of air breaking rang out without any warning, and the palanquin that was walking alone on the street from all directions crazily attacked. Sharp arrows, iron lotus seeds, flying knives. Countless hidden weapons were the first to attack the palanquin in the coming storm. A rain of hidden weapons that was denser than a downpour. With a bang, a short hammer connected to an iron chain directly smashed the roof of the palanquin. The 8 people accompanying Jun Moxie could be considered experts of the Jun family, and their reactions were extremely fast. All of the hidden weapons were aimed at Jun Moxie in the palanquin. Apart from 2 of them who were caught off guard and were injured, the others had already sensed that something was wrong in the blink of an eye. They casually pulled out their weapons, and bang 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 sounds rang out, and the hidden weapons that were aimed at them fell to the ground. Protect the young master. With a loud roar, the 8 people surrounded the palanquin. Of the 2 who were injured, one had an arrow in his shoulder, and the other had a dart in his leg. Although their faces were deathly pale from the pain, they didn't even make a sound. After this unusually dense round of hidden weapons attack, it suddenly became quiet, and there was no other sound except for the whistling of the wind. Jun Moxie's heart sank. Assassins. Moreover, they are a well-trained, organized, and experienced group of assassins. The leader of the bodyguards hastily ordered, "Right now, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. We must break out of the encirclement. The 2 of you, take care of the young master. If the situation is not good, immediately protect the young master and escape. The 2 of you will cover the rear, and the 4 of us will provide support in the middle. We must ensure the young master's safety." Everyone solemnly accepted the order. There is no need to cover the rear. Let's all leave together. Jun Moxie's voice came from the palanquin. The enemy's manpower is clearly greater than ours. In the previous round of attack, there were at least dozens of arrows, darts, throwing knives, iron lotus seeds, sleeve arrows, flying hammers, circular blades, flying forks, rope darts. Moreover, their close and long-range coordination is excellent, and the intersecting of the upper and lower parts is also good. Against such an enemy, covering the rear is useless, and once our manpower is scattered, it will only further accelerate our defeat. The only way to survive is to go straight ahead. Jun-Hu, take a look. Is there a turn 10 zhang ahead? Chapter 168. Jun Mo Xie knew that the enemy's main target was obviously him. The previous round of hidden weapons had been aimed at him while he was in the palanquin. Now that the upper half of the palanquin had disappeared, they were waiting to see how he would react. If he had been killed by the previous round of hidden weapons, then these people wouldn't even show their faces once they verified that he had been killed. Instead, they would immediately retreat. 10 feet ahead, there is a corner. After turning that corner is the road to the Jun family's residence. Jun-Hu, the leader of the guards, immediately replied in a low voice. Good. Now listen to my orders, no objections. Otherwise, you will be expelled from the Jun family, understand? Jun Moxie's voice was extremely low, almost inaudible, but his tone was extremely strict. The 8 guards were startled, but understood that this was not the time to argue, and hastily nodded their heads. Jun Moxie could see that most of the hidden weapons were mixed with a golden luster, and there were also 5 or 6 of them with a bright blue xian qi, but what really surprised him was that there were 3 hidden weapons with a yellow xian qi. Who wants to kill me? Why would they send out such a luxurious lineup? Jun Moxie cursed in his heart. I'm afraid that the last time they tried to assassinate the princess, their lineup was not even half as strong as this one. Am I more popular than the princess now? Abandon the palanquin immediately and rush forward at full speed. Their target this time is me. Don't worry, I'll be fine, you go first, I can escape by myself. June Moxie calmly commanded. That won't do. We will not abandon the young master no matter what. This is our only duty. Didn't the young master say that we will live and die together? Why did he change his mind? Junwoo shook his head, his eyes wide open. He never thought that June Moxie would give such an order. Nonsense, I'm asking you to work together. As long as I'm not dead, you will listen to me. Now, obey my orders. June Moxie lowered his voice and patiently said, moreover, from the attack just now, I can see that there is an Earth Xian expert among them, and it is very likely that there is more than one. If you stay, you won't be of any help. Instead, you'll become my burden. Only when all of you escape will it be easier for me to escape. Just do as this young master says. Since that's the case, we'll wait for young master ahead. I hope we can attract more troops. Junwoo no longer hesitated, he made up his mind. If the young master is killed, then he and the others don't need to wait for the family law or military law, they can just cut their own throats. After exchanging greetings, the 8 figures suddenly burst forth and charged forward. I don't care who you are, and I don't care who ordered you. If you want to kill me, you must be prepared to be killed by me. June Moxie watched as the 8 guards pounced forward. His eyes were suddenly suffused with a kind of brilliance that had not been seen for a long time. He muttered, looks like today, it is inevitable that I will have to eat meat again. Then let me start a massacre. Hee hee. June Moxie had an evil smile on his face. His body was lying flat in the palanquin, but it was like a snowflake placed in the hot summer sun, suddenly disappearing without a trace. The only thing left on the ground was an empty palanquin. This action surprised the assassins who were hiding in the shadows. They had been following June Moxie for several days. They had even bribed many of the street vendors in preparation for this moment. Moreover, they had obtained information from a reliable source about June Moxie's route today. They had already concluded that the person inside the palanquin must be that debauchee June Moxie. But why did these guards abandon the palanquin? Was it to attract our attention? However, this doesn't make sense. They didn't even look to see if the person inside the palanquin was dead or alive. How could there be such irresponsible guards in this world? Moreover, these guards are the June family's imperial guards who are famous for their fearlessness towards death. This is really strange. Could it be that there is no one inside the palanquin? That can't be right. I saw them carrying the palanquin a moment ago. From the strength of the palanquin, I can clearly see that there is someone inside. But there must be a reason why they abandoned the palanquin and ran away. The leader of the assassins thought for a moment and immediately ordered, Team 2, stop these 8 people and kill them. Don't let a single one of them escape. Team 1, follow me to the palanquin and drag out that thief June. Immediately, a dozen or so figures appeared from all directions and chased after the 8 guards. In that direction, there were already a few people blocking the way of the guards breaking out of the encirclement. With a few swishing sounds, these shadows suddenly appeared around the palanquin from all 4 directions. They had sealed off any possible escape route for the people inside the palanquin. Their faces were covered with black masks and their swords flashed. Third young Master June inside the palanquin, you can come out now. Such a flawed plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain is useless. The leader of the assassins stood in front of the palanquin and spoke slowly in a cold voice. You're still inside. I'm 100% sure of this. If June Sunshao doesn't want to come out, then please forgive me for setting him on fire. The black-masked man's eyes revealed a perverted sense of pleasure. It seemed as if the thought of using fire to burn June Xia to death was a kind of cruel delight. The leader of the assassins repeated his words twice, but there was still no response from the palanquin. A little further away, the men of the second team were already fighting with the 8 guards of the June family. Banging sounds could be heard continuously. In order to reduce the pressure on the young master's side, the 8 guards were fighting with all their might in order to attract more attention. On the other hand, although the men of the second team were valiant assassins, they were far stronger than the 8 guards. Moreover, the 8 guards weren't the target of this trip, so there was no need for them to fight with their lives on the line. Moreover, the experts of the second team were concentrated around the palanquin, so the two sides were evenly matched. Suddenly, a bang sound was heard in the middle of the fierce battle, and a rocket shot up into the sky. It's the June family's special distress signal. The leader of the assassins knew that if he delayed any longer, there would be an unforeseen event. He clenched his teeth, and without hesitation, he waved his hand and shouted fiercely, "Set the fire." 5 or 6 torches were lit at the same time, and thrown into the palanquin. The palanquin was made of cloth, bamboo, wood, and other materials in order to be light and comfortable, so it was easy to burn. The wind helped the fire burn, and in an instant the fire raged. The black-masked man laughed heartily. It was as if he could already see June Moxie struggling and begging for mercy in the fire. But his laughter came to an abrupt end. The crackling sound of the burning was incessant, but there was no other sound in the fire. If there was a living person inside, or even a corpse, then the smell would be different. What's going on? Is that debauchee really not in the palanquin? With a wave of his hand, the 2 black-masked men on either side of him simultaneously shook their hands, and 2 long black ropes flew out from their hands like snakes, and wrapped themselves around one side of the burning palanquin. With a tug, the palanquin, which was already on the verge of collapse, disintegrated into pieces. There was no one there. "Li Jiwu, what's going on?" A cold and delicate voice came from Lengling. A woman in black quietly stood up in the distance. Her figure was graceful, but her eyes were extremely cold. She seemed exceptionally disappointed. "Oh no! I've been tricked." Li Jiwu's heart shook, and he was about to turn around when suddenly, a silver bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, and the sound of a thunderclap rang out. The heavy rain was like the Milky Way bursting its banks, and came crashing down. At this moment, the June family's 8 bodyguards were besieged by more than twice the number of assassins. Although they were fighting with all their might, the difference in strength between the two sides was still quite large. Moreover, fighting with all their might had consumed their Xian Qi, and they were gradually unable to hold on any longer. In a moment, several of the bodyguards were wounded, and their blood was flying everywhere. In fact, if they had chosen to break out of the encirclement, a few of them would have been able to escape. But these few men were determined to attract the enemy's attention, and would fight to the death. "If you don't leave now, then what are you waiting for?" Along with these words, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind one of the assassins, and 2 slender white fingers abruptly pinched the man's Adam's apple. With a light squeeze, the assassin's eyes blurred with disbelief, and the knife in his hand trembled twice, and then he fell backwards. Because the figure's appearance was too strange, the other assassin didn't see the enemy's sneak attack at all. Seeing his companion suddenly fall for no reason, he couldn't help but ask in bewilderment, "What's wrong?" The 2 of them didn't know each other very well, so they reached out to support him. Just as their palms touched the body of their companion, the other 15 or 16 people suddenly shouted in alarm, "Watch out!" Too late. He only felt a cold sensation in his throat, and heard a crack in his ears, as if something had snapped. Then he was surprised to find that his eyes were actually looking at his own buttocks. "What's going on? I was clearly looking forward, how could I see a fart?" His thoughts ended here. A head drooped down, and his dead fish-like eyes were still looking at his own buttocks in disbelief. Dead! That person was really lucky. He didn't feel any pain even until death, and didn't use any external objects to look at his own buttocks. The first time was also the last time, however, he wasn't the only one who had this luck. Because, a flash of lightning and a clap of thunder, accompanied by heavy rain. Under the illumination of the lightning, almost everyone discovered an unbelievable and strange phenomenon. A fleeting figure suddenly appeared like a ghost in the midst of the 4 assassins' encirclement. No one discovered where he came from, and no one heard the sound he made when he appeared. Was it the deity's movement, or was it the phantom transformation? He was like a devil in a nightmare, seen with one's eyes, but completely unable to touch. And this devil was calmly harvesting their lives, but they couldn't resist, and could only passively accept it. Chapter 169. This figure only made one movement, or it should be said that he made countless movements at the same time, a left kick, silent but with the force of a thunderbolt, aimed at the vital point of an assassin's crotch. His left hand went straight and clawed a big hole in the throat of another assassin. His right hand twisted the neck of the assassin in front of him, letting him experience the luck of being able to see the buttocks of the assassin in front of him, and then he retreated like lightning, crashing into the chest of the assassin behind him, his elbows fiercely thrust forward. Coincidentally or not, the knife in the hands of the assassin behind him just happened to pierce through his clothes, but not even the slightest bit of flesh was injured. The first assassin screamed as he was sent flying with blood flowing out of his orifices, then the other two assassins spun around and fell to the ground, and the face of the assassin behind the mysterious figure showed a look of disbelief, followed by a gurgling of blood. His body slowly went limp like a pile of mud. His body was in a very strange position which one of the people present was not experienced. At a glance, it was obvious that all the bones in this person's chest cavity and spine had been completely shattered. At the moment of the lightning strike, the mysterious figure who suddenly appeared seemed to be accompanied by the power of heaven and earth, and killed 6 assassins in one fell swoop. In the blink of an eye, 6 lives that were still alive just a moment ago had completely disappeared. It seemed that in his eyes, these cold-blooded assassins who had been through hundreds of battles and rigorous training, were so vulnerable that they were not even worth mentioning. 6 lives were taken, and this person did not even reveal the level of his Xian Qi. Only relying on physical strength, he killed 6 high-level assassins in one fell swoop. "Follow me." The mysterious figure's face was covered, and his voice was low as he shouted at the Jun family's bodyguards. "And the young master, please." Junhu was panting violently, but he still turned his head to look, but before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by the mysterious figure. "Jun Moxie has already left. What are you waiting for? If it weren't for you guys staying here, he would have already reached home." Junhu and the others heard that the young master was out of danger. Their hearts were shaken, and they followed after him in a spurt of energy. The mysterious man wasn't boasting. If it weren't for saving them, Jun Dashao would have already reached home. Because this mysterious person was Jun Moxie himself. After the guards had left, Jun Xia immediately took off his robe, covered his face, and used the Yinyang escape technique to sneak into the ground. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to rescue Junhu and the others, he could have directly escaped back to the Jun family's mansion. After all, the mansion was very close to the mansion, and although Jun Dashao's strength was still shallow, he could still escape in one breath. Everyone stared at the ground. Who would have thought that there was actually someone in this world who could travel freely underground? This was simply inconceivable, and it overturned everyone's understanding. Ever since the Xian continent had been inhabited, such a thing had never happened. Naturally, no one was aware of it, and no one had even thought about it. However, the creation of heaven and earth was not something that belonged to this world, and had long since exceeded the scope of Xian Qi. It was reasonable that no one could understand it, or else it would be a waste of the profound meaning of the creation of heaven and earth. It was precisely because of this godly technique that the young Master Jun, whose strength had yet to be fully revealed, was able to kill 6 people with a wave of his hand. Because no one could figure out how he had appeared in the first place. It took a long time for one to react from the initial shock, and then to act. Although this process would only take a few tenths of a second for a well-trained assassin, but for the hitman Jun, it was more than enough time. This gap gave him enough time to reap the lives of the assassins, and he didn't even need to use his throwing knife, as he had already opened up a gap in the encirclement. At this moment, the leader of the assassins, Li Jiwu, had already confirmed that something was wrong, and had turned around to rush over. He was almost flying close to the ground, and his bright yellow protective Xian Qi was exceptionally dazzling in the pouring rain. It was as if a small sun had suddenly appeared in the dark of the night. The pouring rain fell on his Xian Qi shield, and unexpectedly, it was as if the neon lights of a modern rainy night were blurred and beautiful. At his side, 2 yellow Xian Qi lights were also flashing, and their speed was not much slower than Li Jiwu's. 3 Earth Xian assassins were approaching at almost the same time. At this moment, 10 assassins were chasing after Jun Moxie and the others, and were angrily chasing after them. The one in front of Jun Moxie was a masked man dressed in black, and was holding a long sword in his hand. He stood there motionless, like an impenetrable mountain wall, and blocked the route that Jun Moxie and his bodyguards had taken to break out of the encirclement. This man's body was shrouded in a layer of Xian Qi. Yu Xian's expert. It seemed that this man should be the leader of the second team of assassins. This man didn't need to kill, and he didn't need to kill anyone. The only thing he needed to do was slow down Jun Moxie's momentum, and then they would once again fall into the encirclement of the assassins. Because, with their current strength, they wouldn't be able to hold out until the Jun family's reinforcements arrived. Life or death, victory or defeat, could be decided in the snap of a finger. But how could the hitman Jun do as he wished? At this moment, Jun Moxie was at the forefront of the team, and he was like the sharpest dagger, or the tip of an indestructible spear. His whole body didn't hesitate, and didn't slow down in the slightest as he rushed forward, and faced the gleaming long sword with his chest out to meet it. This posture looked very much like suicide. The green light flashed and then flourished. The raindrops that filled the sky fell on the surface of the green light barrier, as if they had fallen on a hard stone floor, and were actually splashed away. This black-clothed assassin, Yu Xian, was going all out. He wanted to kill this mysterious person, who was also the core member of the Jun family's team. The blue light of the sword was first retracted like lightning, and then like a blue dragon, it rode on the clouds and thunder, and went straight towards Jun Moxie's chest. The killing range of this sword was no less than 5 feet in front of Jun Moxie's body, and the power of this sword was abundant and unstoppable. This sword was accompanied by the bursts of thunder in the sky, and even the assassin Yu Xian himself felt that this sword was the pinnacle of his Xian Qi cultivation over the decades. At this moment, he was confident that even a peak Earth Xian expert in front of him wouldn't be able to take a single step forward in a short period of time. Not to mention this unknown masked expert in front of him. His Xian Qi couldn't even shine, and it was obvious that he was a rookie. Could it be that such a person is a spirit Xian expert? If he was a Shen Xian expert, then he would naturally be able to pass through his line of defense, but to die under the hands of a Shen Xian expert was also an honor. In fact, this Jade Xian expert had even silently cursed himself in that split second. It was obvious that this was impossible. In fact, it was extremely absurd. After all, a spirit Xian expert would have been able to kill all of them in an instant if he had attacked. How could he kill them one by one like this? Besides, Shen Xian experts weren't cabbages that could be found everywhere. The sword was like a bolt of lightning, and the speed at which Jun Moxie faced the tip of the sword was also like a bolt of lightning. The two attacks were about to collide, and the eyes of this Yu Xian assassin revealed a cruel look of excitement, as he had already reached a distance where he couldn't dodge no matter what. Even if he wanted to change his move to spare his life, it was already impossible, not to mention that this kid seemed to be afraid that he wouldn't die a happy death, flying so fast. Could it be that this was the legendary courting death? However, at the last moment when the two of them were about to come into close contact, Jun Moxie's feet didn't stop, nor did his speed decrease, but his entire upper body suddenly twisted, as if it violated the normal law. Below his waist, he was still facing this Yu Xian assassin, but his face and the front of his upper body had already turned sideways. If one were to make an analogy, it was like his whole body had been forcibly changed from a wide plank to a narrow piece of wood. This was simply too strange. It was simply unthinkable that such a thing had happened. Unless Jun Moxie's waist was a semi-mobile toy installed with sliding beads, and he could twist it however he wanted, otherwise it was absolutely impossible. Was this something that a normal person could do? Shwa! The ice-cold long sword, with the unique green light of Yu Xian, pierced through the left side of Jun Moxie's chest and out the right side. Langlang's sword was tightly attached to the skin of Jun Moxie's chest, bringing out a stream of blood, bursting into the sky full of raindrops. Although Jun Moxie dodged extremely quickly, and the evasion that exceeded the limits of the human body was also extremely exquisite, a layer of flesh was still scraped off. However, this small sacrifice was completely worth it. This was because Jun Moxie's body was like a high-speed flying cannonball, but at this moment, he suddenly crashed into the arms of this Yuxian assassin. The huge momentum and the huge inertia carried the feet of this Yuxian expert off the ground, flying forward together with Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie was moving forward, but he was moving backwards. Moreover, he was moving backwards involuntarily. His mind was still in the midst of continuing excitement, but he was forced to move backwards due to the blow. The expression in the eyes of this Yuxian assassin's eyes had yet to change from the cruel excitement of killing the enemy to extreme shock at the moment of killing the enemy. Jun Moxie's right elbow had already heavily hit the position of his heart. Boom! Gotcha, a muffled sound. He still could not react in time, and the pain from his nerve endings had not yet reached the central part of his brain. Jun Moxie's right palm struck 3 times in a row, and at the same time, heavily struck the assassin's throat. The fragile laryngeal bone suddenly emitted a sound like the sound of broken glass on the ground suddenly colliding together. His head was just lifted by the force of the force. 2 fingers of Jun Moxie's left hand, with a sharp gust of wind, at the same time as the movement of his right hand, stabbed into the assassin's 2 eye sockets almost at the same time. Black, milky white and red things burst out at the same time. Chapter 170. What a ruthless method. Perhaps Jun Moxie's method couldn't be considered ruthless, it was simply a vicious torture. This series of attacks was enough to be fatal, but Jun Moxie had used such a vicious move 10 times in a single breath. There was no other reason than the fact that the person blocking his way was a Yuxian expert. If he couldn't break through in one go, he might be able to escape with the help of the yin-yang escape, but the 8 bodyguards behind him wouldn't be spared. It's better for you to die than for me to die. So you have no choice but to die. Jun Moxie knew that his current skill was still shallow, so he didn't expect to be able to break through the opponent's Xian Qi defense and kill him. Therefore, the attacks were as dense as raindrops in the sky. Once they started, there would be no end to them. If the Yuxian expert had died a miserable death, then he could only blame himself for being too strong. After all, the previous 6 assassins had died painlessly. Jun Moxie's body still maintained a high speed as he launched this series of deadly attacks, without the slightest pause. The body of the Yuxian assassin seemed to be hanging on Jun Moxie's body, and was being carried by him as he madly ran. Unexpectedly, the attacks didn't stop even for a moment. Boom! The Jade Xian expert's body had suddenly been split into pieces by Jun Moxie's attack. His 4 limbs had separated in 4 different directions, and his head had floated up into the air with a bang sound. It was as if someone had fiercely stomped on a rubber ball, and had suppressed the power of the explosion as it flew up into the air. The torso in the center of the assassin's body had already turned into minced meat and broken bones. Jun Moxie and the 8 bodyguards quickly passed through the sky full of blood, and didn't slow down even a little during the whole process. The assassins chasing from behind could clearly see that this demon-like figure had forcefully opened up a large hole in the leader's body. Just like that, the figure pierced through the leader's paper-like body. Jun Moxie adjusted his body in an instant. The shining sword was still hanging on his body. However, following the change in his posture, it was placed horizontally on his chest. On the hilt of the sword, there were actually 5 fingers connected to his wrist. Green veins were popping out as they firmly gripped the sword. It showed the determination of the sword master to kill the enemy. With a spurt of energy, the 9 of them finally made it past the corner of the street. In the distance, several beams of colorful Xian Qi were rushing over in the rain. It was the Jun family's reinforcements. Xiao Qi. The leader of the assassins, Li Jiwu, who was rushing over, froze in the midst of the heavy rain. The head that had flown up into the sky fell down with a bang, landing right at his feet. It rolled twice before looking up. The face that had lost both eyes and life, the frozen expression on the corner of his mouth was actually a sinister smile, as though he was about to succeed. The lightning-fast attack had actually killed him before he could even change the expression on his face. The brothers that he had been with for so many years, through life and death situations, had turned into a pile of flesh and blood in front of him. Not only was his head separated from his body, it was even worse than death by 1,000 cuts. He didn't even have the extravagant hope of putting together a complete corpse. What kind of feeling was this? The leader of the assassins felt his heart bleeding. Just a few days ago, Shao Qi was still bragging about how smart his youngest son was, and how virtuous and kind his wife was. He was even looking forward to helping the young lady get her revenge. He would wash his hands and go into seclusion. He would no longer care about the affairs of the world. He would concentrate on his wife and children's lives, farming, and raising flowers. What a carefree and happy life that would be. He still remembered the undisguised desire on Shao Qi's face when he said those words. And he was tired of living a life of licking blood on the edge of a knife. Just a moment ago, he was still standing together with him, following his orders to block the Jun family's guards. And now, he was killed in front of him. And he died in such a miserable way. All because of an order from him. Who are you? Leave your name if you have the guts. Li Jiwu's face was covered with a black cloth as he stood in the pouring rain and roared. His voice was like the cry of an old ape at night, extremely mournful. Who the hell are you? Lightning crisscrossed the sky a few times, and muffled thunder sounded continuously, one after another, like the drumbeats of a battlefield, powerful and heavy. Oppressive and bloody. Jun Dashao snorted coldly, "Who are you? Leave your name if you have the guts." At this moment, the Jun family's reinforcements had arrived, and the situation had been reversed. It would be best if he could take advantage of the moment when the leader lost his beloved general, and find out the identity of the other party. Li Jiwu said hatefully, "I am. You damn traitor, don't you dare to leave your name." Finally, he reined in his horse at the last moment, and didn't reveal his name. There was only silence in front of him, and no one answered. Only the sound of the Jun family's reinforcements could be heard from all directions. "Retreat!" A clear and cold voice rang out. The black-clothed girl's clothes were completely soaked and her beautiful hair stuck to her face. Her clear and cold eyes flickered with pain and disappointment, but she still resolutely gave the order to retreat. Li Jiwu seemed to have awoken from a dream, and the two people beside him bent down to pick up Shao Qi's head, and the other person helped him up, and were about to leave. A strange sound came from his throat, and it seemed as if his soul had suddenly collapsed. He suddenly broke free, and then snatched Shao Qi's head, and held it in his arms. Finally, he looked at the Jun family's reinforcements, and the running Jun Moxie bodyguards in front of him, and his eyes were filled with hatred as deep as the mountains, and as deep as the sea. Without saying a word, he turned around and left. "Shao Qi, your big brother, will take you home." Two mournful and muddy tears mixed into the rain and disappeared without a sound. "Retreat!" The black-clothed assassins didn't have time to collect the corpses of their companions on the ground, and one by one, they jumped away, and went through the heavy curtain of rain. A moment later, the Jun family's reinforcements arrived, but there were only a few cold corpses left. Jun Moxie had just resolved the crisis, and his probing had failed, so he lowered his body, turned around, and hid behind a weeping willow on the side of the street. A golden Xian Qi light came from afar, and flew like a big bird, piercing through the curtain of rain, and landed in front of the 8 injured bodyguards, and looked them up and down. "It's good that no one died. Where is the young master?" It was the housekeeper, old Pang. The Jun family's housekeeper, who had always hidden his strength, was actually a peak Earth Xian expert. The 8 people were stunned at the same time. That man had said that the young master was out of danger, but where was the young master? Where did he go? Didn't he go home? They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. Old Pang's wrinkled face suddenly raised his eyebrows. He asked in a gloomy voice, "You abandoned the young master, and fled alone?" His voice was filled with killing intent. It's a mysterious expert. He said that he had rescued the young master. We were surrounded, and it was him who saved us." "Did the young master not return home?" Jun-Hu was ashamed, and deeply bowed his head. If the young master was not safe, then even 100 deaths wouldn't be enough to make up for it. A mysterious expert? Where is that mysterious expert? Where is he? Old Pang asked 3 questions in a row, and his voice was getting colder and colder. You casually believed the words of an outsider, and disregarded the young master's safety, and only cared about your own life. What use do you have for the June family? Plop! The 8 people simultaneously fell to their knees in the rain, and were speechless as they prepared to receive their punishment. Old Pang sighed, and then shouted in a stern voice, June who? Back then, the old master took pity on you, and accepted you into the June family. He taught you martial arts, and repeatedly took on great responsibilities. That's why the young master's safety was placed in your hands. Now that the young master's fate is unknown, and according to the family's rules, you will be sentenced to death. What else do you have to say? This subordinate has nothing to say. I am willing to accept my punishment. Junhu was still kneeling on the ground, and the rain was pouring down on his head, but his face was expressionless. In fact, at this moment, he could have said that he and the others left first because they were following the young master's orders. In fact, because they were not the target of the assassination, if they had used all their strength to break through, they would have been able to escape a long time ago. However, in order to attract the enemy's attention, they fought with their lives on the line. If the young master had an accident, then it would be a dereliction of duty on his part. This was an obvious fact, and it would be a dereliction of duty whether he said it or not. Wait, wait, wait. June Moxie appeared from behind a broken wall, and ran over. Old Pang, don't wrongly accuse good people. If Junhu hadn't led the enemy away, then I wouldn't have been able to escape. Speaking of which, Junhu and the others have done nothing wrong. Is that true? Old Pang's face immediately softened. Why didn't you say so earlier? He turned around and asked, where did the mysterious expert who saved you go? This person saved the young master's life, and the June family owes him a great debt of gratitude. This subordinate saw him go in a certain direction, but his movements were too mysterious, so this subordinate can't be sure. June, who was still kneeling on the ground, and raised his hand to point in the direction where June Moxie had come from. That man is really a weirdo. He threw me into a mess. June Mo Xia rubbed his forehead. There seemed to be a bruise on his forehead. He just went over and kicked me. He saved my life, but he actually left without saying goodbye. He was really rude. What does this man look like? Old Pang's mind was spinning. His face was covered, so I couldn't see clearly. June Moxie and June Who replied at the same time. However, June Moxie's voice was full of indifference, while June Who's voice was full of gratitude. I didn't think that after the marshal's display of power, there would still be people who would dare to lay their hands on the young master. Old Pang said in a low voice, and then waved his hand, the 8 of you, after you've recovered, go see Sanyi and report everything that happened today. Do not omit a single detail. Afterwards, leave everything to Sanyi to handle. Yes. The 8 men replied in unison and stood up. Chapter 171. Young Master, are you still able to participate in the family banquet? Old Pang took an umbrella from the guard behind him and placed it on top of June Moxie's head. No problem. I'm not injured. June Moxie replied heroically. I'm used to this kind of small scene. It's nothing. Old Pang's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. But in his heart, he said that he was used to it. That didn't seem to be a lie. Last time, the princess was assassinated, and this time, the scale of the assassination was almost the same. Last time, he was injured and couldn't get up. But now, he could run and jump. Then, young master, please return to the mansion. The marshal and Master Guan have been waiting for a long time. Old Pang said. Wait a minute. I still need to go back and check my palanquin. There should be some things inside. June Moxie took the umbrella and turned around to go back. The palanquin had been hit by hidden weapons, burned by fire, and then drenched by rain. It had almost turned into a pile of dirty black ashes. What could be left of it? Old Pang was puzzled. But for the sake of safety, he still followed. June Moxie was like a headless fly. He circled around the wreckage of the palanquin a few times. Then, he actually picked up a few things from the ground. Then, he looked to the east and looked to the west. Then, he walked back to Old Pang with the umbrella in his hand and said, "Well, let's go. I don't believe that the hidden weapons you picked up are yours." Old Pang was also an Earth Xian expert. So, how could he not see what June Moxie had picked up? He cursed in his heart. Picking up the enemy's hidden weapons in the heavy rain. Moreover, these hidden weapons were very common. So, according to common sense, there shouldn't be any clues. This young master really thinks that he's smart, but he didn't notice that when June Moxie turned near a wall, his eyes quietly lit up. Then, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a sure-enough smile. Although the rain was pouring, although the wind was howling. However, after a person had just been there would always be traces left behind. It was just a matter of whether the searcher would notice it or not. Just like here, this wisp of fragrance was drifting in the wind. Although it was so faint that it was almost undetectable, Hitman June's nose had been strengthened by the Hongjun Pagoda. Even if it was even fainter, he would still be able to smell it. It was indeed a very familiar smell, and that retreat sound was also very interesting. This was enough. June Moxie smiled wretchedly. When June Moxie returned home, Grandpa June was standing at the entrance of the hall. His eyes swept over his grandson's body a few times. After confirming that he was fine, he frowned and reprimanded him. "When will you let me feel at ease? Hurry up and change your clothes." June Mo Xia nodded obediently and left like a wisp of smoke. In fact, June Dashao was cursing in his heart. "Grandpa, this assassin's intentions don't seem to have anything to do with me. The root cause is your actions. But this isn't something that can be explained in a few words. Let's talk about it later." By the time June Mo Xia had changed his clothes and arrived at the front hall, the dishes were already being served in an endless stream. Jun Wui was still sitting upright in his wheelchair. His legs were covered with a thin blanket. He looked at June Moxie with a smile that wasn't a smile. He whispered, "I don't know what kind of expert is capable of killing people so cleanly. Mo Xia, third uncle, I'm very curious. That mysterious expert, you tell me, third uncle, do I know him?" Third uncle, the world is so big that nothing is too strange. Capable people are emerging one after another. June Moxie smiled mischievously. "Stop. I don't want to discuss this with you." Jun Wui glared at him and stopped him from talking. "Do you have any idea about those people this time?" "I do have some idea. I should be about 30% sure." June Moxie winked. "Do you want me to send someone to help?" Jun Wui's expression suddenly became cold. These people dared to assassinate June Moxie. This had aroused Third Master June's terrifying killing intent. "The time is not right yet." June Moxie smiled. "The things they made for me haven't been delivered yet. It won't be too late to kill them when they are delivered. If we act now, we will only alert the enemy." "You mean, the crossbows that you mentioned before?" Jun Wui's eyes lit up. "Third uncle is really far-sighted. You can see through everything clearly. You can plan strategies in a tent and win a battle 1,000 miles away." June Moxie flattered. Jun Wui didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Where are the steward's people?" June Moxie asked curiously. "Aren't they supposed to be welcoming them today? Why aren't they here?" "They are currently in your sister-in-law's courtyard. Qing Han seems to be throwing a tantrum." Jun Wui smiled reservedly. "After all, this is the steward's family business. We can wait for a while." When he said the last sentence, June Moxie had already turned his head. Outside the door, in the midst of the heavy rain, a few figures were slowly walking in. Whoever he said arrived. It was the steward's party. There were a total of 5 people attending the banquet. Sister-in-law Guan Qinghan's pretty face was as cold as ice as she walked at the back. The first person in line was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His face was thin and his figure was tall. He was dressed in a green robe as he walked over. The heavy rain that filled the sky didn't seem to touch him at all. He was the current head of the steward's family, Dong Lu. He was also the father of Guan Qinghan. Behind him was an unusually tall and strong old man. His hair and beard were white, but he had a tiger's back and a bear's waist. He had a leopard's head and round eyes. He looked like half an iron tower. When he opened and closed his eyes shone brightly. He was the #1 expert in the steward's family, Guan Rushan. Behind Guan Rushan were two young men, tall and slender, with a jade-like face and red lips, handsome and graceful. They were Guan Qinghan's brother and sister, the eldest son Guan Qingbo and the second son Guan Qingyu. Look at how they were born. The eldest sister-in-law is graceful, elegant and moving, while the brother and the younger brother are also elegant, romantic and handsome young men. The steward's genes were really good. Jun Moxie thought maliciously, are they embroidered pillows? Brother Guan. Jun Wu-yi was seated in his wheelchair, and smiled as he cupped his fists in greeting. Third brother Jun Wu-yi, no need to be so polite. Guan Donglu smiled and cupped his hands in return. He then ordered his two sons to greet Jun Wu-yi. This must be the third young Master Jun, right? He was indeed a handsome young man with a talented appearance and an extraordinary bearing. Third brother Jun, the Jun family has finally found a worthy successor. Guan Donglu looked at Jun Imo Xia and laughed in a very affectionate manner. He was indeed worthy of being the head of the steward's family. To be able to say such hypocritical and polite words in such a natural and sincere manner. Young Master Jun instantly gave such an evaluation to this young Master Guan, who could barely be considered as his relative. At this moment, Jun Moxie suddenly felt that the young man behind Guan Donglu had intentionally or unintentionally flashed behind Guan Donglu. He was looking at Jun Moxie with an expression of anger, then shock and astonishment, as if Jun Moxie shouldn't be here at all. Although the strange look in his eyes disappeared in an instant, and almost no one noticed it, but how could the hitman's keen senses escape? Jun Moxie couldn't help but wonder, what's the reason for this? What does he have to do with me? After searching through his memories, Jun Imo Xia was able to determine that neither he nor the previous Imo Xia had any contact with each other. In fact, he hadn't even seen each other before. So why is this second young Master Guan so shocked? What is he so surprised about? Jun Moxie's heart was filled with countless thoughts, but his face remained indifferent as he stepped forward and greeted Guan Qingbo and Guan Qingyu. These two were sister-in-law's blood-related brothers, so it wasn't convenient for them to use their debauches at this time. After the initial introductions, it was natural for the old to greet the old, and the young to greet the young. Besides Jun Moxie, the Jun family didn't have any other descendants, so the heavy responsibility of entertaining the two young masters of the Guan family naturally fell on Jun Dashao's thin shoulders. Greetings, Jun Sunshao. The two brothers saluted together. Originally, the two of them were older than Jun Moxie, so if it was from Guan Qinghan's point of view, they would address Jun Dashao as third brother. However, although the Guan family was also a Xianqi aristocratic family, and was a hegemon in Jianghu, their wealth and power were far inferior to the Jun Moxie family. Therefore, the two brothers had to greet Jun Moxie first. This way of addressing Jun Moxie meant that they didn't see him as their sister's brother-in-law. These two were still young, so they couldn't be considered shrewd. Otherwise, they would have been like their father and affectionately addressed Jun Dashao as third brother. With just this one greeting of Jun Sunshao, Jun Moxie instantly understood many things. His face lit up with a warm smile, and he quickly returned the greeting. Grabbing one of them with each hand, the two of them walked into the hall warmly. Guan Qingyu trembled slightly when Jun Moxie grabbed his hand. Although the trembling was slight, but Jun Moxie could clearly feel the fear in his heart. Jun Imo Xia's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. His face didn't show it, but his mind was constantly thinking about something special. Could it be? Hitman Jun thought to himself as he casually said, the two Guan brothers have traveled thousands of miles to Tianxiang City, but this little brother has been unable to accompany you for the past 2 days. I apologize for my lack of manners. Guan Qingbo smiled elegantly and said, young Master Jun is too polite. We are all in-laws, and are a true family. How can there be any disrespect? Moreover, we have been visiting many places in Tianxiang City for the past 2 days. Tianxiang City is indeed worthy of being called the imperial capital. It is truly bustling, and we two brothers have been enjoying ourselves to the point of forgetting home and home, haha. Guan Qingbo's temperament was quite similar to that of his father, and his words were quite appropriate. This Guan Dashao was quite puzzled. According to the rumors, the Jun family's Jun Sunshao was a good-for-nothing, a debauchee amongst debauches. But today he had seen him in person, and his words were quite appropriate, and not as unbearable as the rumors made him out to be. Oh? Jun Moxie put on a sneaky look, and said in a sneaky tone, then I guarantee that there is a place that is absolutely fun. I guarantee that you have never been there before. What place? Guan Qingbo lowered his voice in response. Jun Moxie's face revealed a wretched smile that only a man would understand. His eyes quickly glanced at Guan Qinghan, and pulled some distance between them. Then he said in a sneaky tone, the Spirit Fog Lake. That is a man's paradise, you haven't been there yet, right, huh? When he said the 3 words, Spirit Fog Lake, Guan Qingyu's face suddenly twitched violently. The following words are free. I originally wanted to write a single chapter, but then I thought it was unnecessary. It's the end of the month, so it's better to stay here and talk to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank my brothers for their support this past month. Thank you all. Attentive readers have already noticed that May is a crucial month for the Evil Prince. It's the first month of the book's release, but Feng Ling's performance during the first half of the month was completely different from the second half. The updates were also not satisfactory. This, I confess, is shameful. Something did happen, and to be exact, my state of mind is still very unstable. Of course, regarding the relocation and the power outage during the day, I won't say much. And Feng Ling himself is confident that even if the power goes off for 12 hours during the day, he will still be able to update at night. Actually, there is another thing, it's very shameful to say it, but in layman's terms, he was kicked. Well, in layman's terms, he fell out of love. This kind of feeling is very satisfying. The person I love the most is going to get married, but I received an invitation. Well, it seems that the groom doesn't need this invitation, right? So it's very melodramatic. I really look forward to it. This is a vulgar plot in a novel, but it's not, it's reality. I hate this reality. I am not a saint, nor am I a gentleman. I am not magnanimous, and I am also very narrow-minded, so I got hurt. If you want to laugh at me, come on, haha. Almost collapsed. The original stock of manuscripts was used up in a few days. Every day, I sat in front of the computer all night, listening to songs all night, but it was a mess, and I couldn't write any words. Brothers, sisters, I have to thank you all. If it wasn't for your support and enthusiasm. Believe me now, I have already collapsed. After being muddle-headed for 4 to 5 days, I started to write. I would go out to look at the moon, listen to the wind, smoke a cigarette, then write a few dozen words, and then go out again. The second half of the month passed just like that. Even in the book, I had more than 10 consecutive chapters without writing any villains. I didn't dare, because with my mentality at that time, when the villains appeared, I was afraid that I would be killed instantly, and it would be a cruel death. This continued until the end of the month, and the only thing I can be proud of was that I didn't stop updating. The reason why I didn't say it before was because I was afraid that some people would say that I used my relationship to act pitiful to cheat monthly votes. I won't allow my feelings to be mocked. I am still proud. From now on, my world is only novels. Let me adjust for a few days. Once I recover, I will fight with everyone to the end. Break out to feel good. In June, there are 2 guaranteed chapters, and the breakout is not fixed. The promise of 3 chapters will not be less than 10 days. Chapter 172. Guan Qingbo thought to himself, this guy was really putting on an act, revealing his true colors in less than 3 sentences. I was wondering what kind of place it was, turns out it's the Spirit Fog Lake. Guan Qingbo laughed mischievously, made a hand gesture and said, we brothers have been here for 2 days, we have spent 1.5 days there. Ah. You two have the same interests, ah, haha, it seems I am not alone, ah. Jun Moxie's expression became even more affectionate, as if he had met a soulmate. How was it? Guan Qingbo's face showed a trace of embarrassment, blushing as he said, actually, we didn't go there to seek pleasure, big brother. Guan Qingbo had just finished his sentence when Guan Qingyu suddenly stopped him and gave him a warning look. Guan Qingbo laughed and said, Qingyu, a man should be open and aboveboard, there is nothing that cannot be said, this is not something to be ashamed of. Besides, Jun Sunshao is also a member of our family, there is no harm in talking about it. Jun Moxie nodded repeatedly, that's right, that's right. But in his heart he was a little puzzled, could it be that these 2 brothers don't get along? Guan Qingbo is obviously trying to expose his brother's past, what does he mean? Third young master, in fact, my second brother has a confidant at the Spirit Fog Lake, haha, this is business. Guan Qingbo's business was really good. So that's how it is. Jun Moxie suddenly realized, Brother Guan really is a romantic person, haha, this is the true nature of my generation, ah. The young Master Jun had finally figured out the entire sequence of events. Why had the timing of this assassination been so ingenious? The Jun family's outsiders had already been eliminated, and his whereabouts had already been considered the Jun family's top secret. But, he had still been caught unprepared by the other party. A thief in the family is really hard to guard against, ah. There is no doubt that Guan Qingyu's confidant is Miss Yu, and it was her who revealed Jun Moxie's whereabouts that led to this assassination attempt. As for whether Guan Qingyu was involved, Jun Moxie deduced that he was. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so flustered when he saw that he was safe and sound. Motherfucker, we kindly welcomed you as relatives, but you actually colluded with us to plot against us? Jun Moxie was cursing Guan Qingyue in his heart. But now was not the time to lash out. Furthermore, from Guan Qingbao's series of reactions, this matter was most likely Guan Qingyue's personal actions and had nothing to do with the Guan family. Even Guan Donglu and Guan Qingba were not aware of this matter, otherwise, why would they dare to attend the banquet at this time? Young people were always impulsive. If a beautiful woman begged him to do something, he would naturally agree without hesitation. Why would he care whether they were relatives or not? How serious would the consequences be? If something really happened to me, do you think a mere housekeeper like you would be able to handle it? The ignorant were indeed fearless. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. Although this isn't a good time for revenge, I can't let you have it so easy. Isn't you your dream lover? Excellent. Excellent. Let's properly praise your precious you. I'll fucking piss you off. So second young Master Guan has acquaintances in the Spirit Fog Lake, sorry for my rudeness. I'm a frequent visitor to the Spirit Fog Lake. Jun Moxie smiled and whispered, speaking of which, I have more acquaintances in the Spirit Fog Lake than second young Master Guan. Jun Sunshao is a native of Tianxiang, so naturally, he is more familiar with the place than me. Guan Qingyue forced a smile. Of course. There are a lot of prostitutes here, and I'm the one who opened them. Jun Moxie had a triumphant look on his face as he whispered, for example, that Ni Chong Pavilion's Lady Yu from the Spirit Fog Lake, everyone says that she is the most beautiful woman in the Spirit Fog Lake, but this young master is her first benefactor. Guan Qingba suddenly cursed in his heart. He had gone to the Spirit Fog Lake with his brother before, so how could he not know that his brother's sweetheart is called Yu? Are these two the same person? Guan Qingyue's face suddenly became ashen. His eyes were like a blade as he stared at June Moxie, and his throat made a gulp sound as he slowly said, "Is that so? Third young master is not bragging, right? That lady is a pure prostitute, how can she be so shameless?" "What? You don't believe me? She's just a prostitute, how can she know what self-respect is? I have proof." June Moxie looked like a perverted wolf, and his eyes were full of reminiscence as his saliva almost flowed out of his mouth. His hands were still moving in the air. "Enough!" Guan Qingyue suddenly roared and stood up. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at June Moxie. "June Moxie! You bastard! You bastard! You shameless bastard!" June Moxie suddenly turned pale with fright, and took a step back in a panic. Trembling with fear, he asked, What are you doing?" This sudden roar shocked everyone present. The June family and the Guan family were in-laws in name, but they were in fact relatives. Now that the in-laws had arrived, June Zhantian naturally had to personally attend. Both families' patriarchs were present, and Guan Donglu was respectfully talking to Grandpa June. Grandpa June was stroking his beard and smiling, as if he was greatly comforted. Guan Rushan and June Wui were sitting on the side with a smile on their faces. From time to time, they would interject with a word or two, causing a burst of laughter. Who would have thought that at this time, the Guan family's second young master would suddenly fly into a rage? Moreover, he was cursing at the only young master of the June family. His voice was abnormally fierce, and his reaction was even more fiery. It was as if he had a grudge against June Moxie for killing his father and stealing his wife. How could the people in charge of the two families not be shocked? This Guan family's second young master's shout had actually achieved an effect that even a master like Shen Xian would not be able to achieve. Grandpa June, June Wui, Guan Donglu, Guan Rushan, Guan Qinghan, Old Pang, and the busy servants of the June family were all stunned. Not to mention the reactions of the servants. Grandpa June and June Wui were people who had killed their way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. What kind of scene had they not seen? But now, they were actually shocked by this little brat's shout. This was something that had never happened before. For the Guan family's second young master to be able to shout out such an earth-shattering voice was enough to comfort him for the rest of his life. Guan Qingyu's entire body was trembling, and his eyes were spitting fire as he glared at June Moxie. A strong murderous aura erupted from his body, and his right hand moved very slowly. His fingers trembled as he gripped the hilt of his sword at his waist. "Evil creature! Have you gone mad?" Guan Donglu finally regained his composure and scolded loudly. He never would have thought that his two sons would suddenly lose their composure in front of the June family's residence. Even if the sky were to fall down, they would not dare to make a move against the June family's sole heir, June Moxie. Isn't this just asking for abuse? Guan Donglu did not know that June Moxie's words had greatly affected Guan Qingyu. Guan Qingyu had met Yu 3 years ago, and it was love at first sight. However, Yu had never been close to him. Guan Qingyu had tried everything he could to pursue her, and he had almost gone crazy. To Guan Qingyu, Yu was everything to him, the goddess of his heart. He would never allow anyone to blaspheme Yu. Not even a single sentence was allowed. But one day, Guan Qingyu received a handkerchief from Yu with 2 words embroidered on it, "Take care." After that, Yu disappeared from his world as if she had evaporated into thin air. Guan Qingyu suddenly became dispirited, and it was only recently that he managed to recover. On his way to Tianxiang City, he unexpectedly received news about the #1 beauty of Tianxiang City's Spirit Fog Lake. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that she was his sweetheart. After arriving at Tianxiang City, he immediately went to see her. Sure enough, it was Yu. What a joy! When Yu heard that Guan Qingyu had accompanied her father to the June family, she had a sad look on her face as she told Guan Qingyu that the June family's third young master, June Moxie, was always looking for trouble with her. She couldn't bear it any longer, so she wanted to teach June Moxie a lesson. Guan Qingyu didn't even think about it, so he readily agreed. Now that he had leaked June Moxie's whereabouts to Yu, his heart was filled with joy. I finally did something for you, But when he saw that June Moxie had suddenly returned safe and sound, he immediately became concerned about you. You was supposed to deal with June Moxie, but now that June Moxie is fine, doesn't this mean that Yu's mission was not successful? How is she now? Would he feel wronged? Would he get hurt? Thinking about this, Guan Qingyu naturally did not have a good expression on his face towards June Moxie. He was angry, and he felt that he was in the wrong. After all, he was the one who leaked June Moxie's whereabouts, and now that he was right in front of him, how could he not feel guilty? But he never expected that June Moxie would immediately hit it off with the two of them, and even talk about his love life. Not only that, but the first name he mentioned was Yu. And he even proudly said that he was Yu's first man. To a man, this was the greatest humiliation. What's more, if he doesn't even have the honor of holding hands with his own goddess, and she's already, the most infuriating thing is that this person doesn't cherish her, and even shamelessly uses his goddess as a way to show off. How can this be tolerated? Guan Qingyu's chest was about to explode from anger. What a great humiliation. May has passed, brothers and sisters, with your strength, you have brought me endless glory. First place on the monthly list of new books. This is the first place that Feng Ling has obtained in Qidian. May 2010 will be the greatest pride of my life. Thank you all. And my personal past, with the turn of this May, will also be covered in dust. Don't comfort me, don't sympathize with me. From now on, I will do my best to laugh with my brothers and sisters, and walk together. Don't let me down, I will not let you down. At the top of the mountain, who will accompany me to enjoy the scenery? Only my brothers. Only my sisters. Chapter 173. Guan Qingyu did not want to believe June Moxie's words, but June Moxie's words were so vivid and lifelike that Guan Qingyu felt like he was on the verge of collapsing. Guan Qingyu turned a deaf ear to his father's words. Gasping for breath, he raised his left hand and pointed it at June Moxie. His lips were trembling, and he was so angry that he couldn't even speak properly. June Moxie. You. Good. If I don't kill you, I'm not a man. At the end of his sentence, tears began to well up in his eyes, a mixture of indelible despair, heart-wrenching pain, and indelible humiliation. June Moxie's heart skipped a beat. This silly boy, he actually fell in love with you. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly changed from late autumn to severe winter with Guan Qingyu's words. June Zhantian and June Wui's faces turned gloomy as a murderous aura surged out from their bodies. In front of Grandpa June and June Wui, he declared that he would kill June Moxie, the only descendant of the June family's third generation. If this matter were to spread, everyone in Tianxiang City would treat it as a joke. And now, this joke has actually happened. Who doesn't know that June Moxie is the June family's biggest taboo? Guan Donglu, Guan Rushan, Guan Qingbo, and even Guan Qinghan, all four of their faces turned deathly pale. Bastard! What nonsense are you spouting? Guan Donglu could no longer sit still and quickly got up and slapped his son's face, apologized to the third young master June. I will not apologize to him. I'm not spouting nonsense. Guan Qingyu stood upright and glared at June Moxie, blood trickling down from the corner of his mouth, but he did not bother to wipe it. June Moxie, as a man, I challenge you to a duel. Duel? Why? June Dashao seemed to be in a daze as he smiled. Second young master Guan, I don't remember when I offended you. Today is the first time we've met. We're all in-laws, and you've come to Tianxiang City to eat, drink, and stay in my June family's residence. We've done everything possible to entertain you, but now the second young master has scolded me in front of everyone, and even wants to duel with me. He even said that he wanted to kill me. May I ask what is the reason behind this? You don't need any reason. What, you don't dare? If you're still a man, then accept it. Guan Qingyue stared straight at June Moxie, provoking him. Bastard! Didn't you hear what I said? Guan Donglu roared as he slapped June Qingyu's face again. His heart was filled with anxiety and anger. If he didn't handle this matter well, then even if the Jun family decided to let him go, Guan Qingyu would never be able to get away with it. Even if the Jun family were to deal with the housekeeper, it would still be reasonable. Who was Jun Moxie? He was the only seedling of the Jun family. The words and actions of the second young master had clearly shown that he wanted to kill Jun Moxie. If someone else had such intentions towards his son, then he would have no choice but to kill them. What choice would Grandpa Jun make if they were of the same mind? Guan Qingyu was still glaring fiercely at Jun Moxie with a stubborn look on his face. He didn't even blink as he faced his father's slap. Guan Donglu's hand was already in the air, and was about to hit Guan Qingyu's face. Suddenly, someone grabbed his wrist tightly, and he turned around to see that it was Jun Wui. Jun Wui smiled warmly and said in an understated manner, "Brother Guan, I think there must be a reason behind your son's words, but as for the reason behind this matter, we need to investigate it thoroughly before we can make a decision. Mo Xia has always been a debauchee, and he might have unintentionally offended the second young master Guan. Besides, this is a conflict between the younger generation, and it would be inappropriate for us to intervene and forcefully suppress it. If our two families were to misunderstand each other, then that would not be good." Jun Wui smiled, and the expression on his face was very genial, but Guan Donglu was startled. Jun Wuyi's words were gentle, but there was a faint sense of oppression in them. It was self-evident. It was as if a heavy mountain was floating above Guan Donglu's head. If he didn't handle it well, then it would come crashing down on him, or even crush the housekeeper and everyone else into a meat patty. "Third uncle, please calm down, let me ask him." Guan Qinghan quietly bowed and walked in front of Guan Qingyu. "Qingyu, what is the reason behind today's matter? Why did you suddenly become so impudent? If Mo Xia's words are wrong, then don't hesitate to speak up and I will help you." She had only seen the three youths huddled together, talking in low voices, and each one of them had a wretched expression on their faces. She assumed that they were talking about something bad, so she spat on the ground and quietly sat down. How could she have imagined that the situation would suddenly change so suddenly? However, Guan Qingyu was still her younger brother, and she believed that he wouldn't cause trouble for no reason. She was certain that Jun Dashao was the one who provoked him first, and her younger brother had no choice but to do such a thing. I. Guan Qingyu stammered for a long time, but was unable to say anything. His face was full of anger and embarrassment. He really couldn't bring himself to say anything. Regardless of Yu Er's original identity, her current identity was that of a prostitute of the Spirit Fog Lakes Nichang Pavilion. If his elder sister and father were to find out that he had challenged the Jun family's third young master to a duel over a prostitute, wouldn't they go crazy? No matter how much Jun Moxie had slandered Yu Er, anyone could only say that Jun Moxie had no sense of propriety, and would never stand up for a mere prostitute. In fact, although Guan Qingyu had met Yu Er back in his hometown, and had even reunited with her in Tianxiang City, he had no idea about Yu Er's origins. But no matter what, Guan Qingyu had set his heart on this woman, and was the goddess of his heart. Guan Qingyu was very firm on this point, and no matter who had blasphemed against his goddess, he would defend her with his life. "Second young master Guan, I would also like to know how I have offended you. If this younger brother has truly offended the second young master, then this younger brother is willing to apologize, please speak freely." Jun Moxie's face was full of puzzlement and sincerity, and he took the opportunity to add insult to injury. "Say something." Guan Qinghan's willowy eyebrows slightly wrinkled. The Jun family's debauchee attitude was very proper, and she looked at her younger brother, and couldn't help but feel a little sad in her heart. Could it be that her younger brother was inferior to a debauchee like Jun Moxie? "Let me explain this matter." Guan Qingbo calmly took over the conversation, and looked at his younger brother with an awkward expression. He knew that this matter had already developed to a very serious point, and if he didn't explain the truth, then he was afraid that it would be a great disaster for the Guan family. Therefore, Guan Qingbo had made the story of Guan Qingyu and Yu Er to be particularly sentimental and sentimental. Moreover, the story was about a pair of lovers who would never change in life and death. However, because of some unknown and irresistible reason, the two of them were separated. Then, Yu somehow ended up drifting to Tianxiang City, and became temporarily a prostitute in a brothel. At that time, Guan Qingyu arrived at Tianxiang City, and the two coincidentally met, and coincidentally, June Moxie turned out to be this girl's former guest. Guan Qingbo's story could be said to be quite subtle, and the story he created was enough to arouse people's sympathy, and the description of the feelings between the two was enough to move one's heart, but even so, Guan Donglu was so angry that her eyes turned black. She almost fainted. Who here didn't understand what was going on? After listening to Guan Qingbo's story, everyone could guess the reason for today's matter. These two debauches, and even relatives by marriage, were openly fighting over a prostitute. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Everyone was silently cursing Guan Qingyue as they stared at him with a look of disdain in their eyes. Just because of a brothel girl, he actually dared to openly compete with the heir of the Jun family for the love of a brothel girl? This second young Master Guan is truly an idiot. The one who was the most furious wasn't the head of the Guan family, Dong Lui, but the eldest daughter of the Guan family, Guan Qinghan. Guan Qinghan had always despised her brother-in-law, Jun Moxie, for being a debauchee, but now, her well-behaved younger brother was also this kind of trash. Guan Qinghan had never imagined that she would ask such a dirty question, and her pretty face turned red with anger. She glared fiercely at Guan Qingyu, and then at Jun Moxie before retreating to the side. Jun Moxie felt somewhat wronged. Your younger brother was the one who stirred up trouble, why are you glaring at me? You still don't know that your younger brother is one of the main culprits behind this old man's assassination attempt? I'm the one who feels wronged. You bastard, you're making this old man furious. Guan Donglu roared, his voice shaking the entire hall. For a woman like this, you actually want to fight to the death with our Guan family's relative, your sister's brother-in-law? Guan Donglu's body trembled with anger, you disobedient son. Unfilial son. You've brought shame to the Guan family. Guan Qingyu saw his father's anger, and was a little regretful and afraid, but he still refused to admit defeat. Bracing himself, he retorted, is my beloved, she is no ordinary woman. Besides, this brat will no longer be my sister's brother-in-law, we came here to annul the engagement, and once it is annulled, he will have nothing to do with the Guan family. Beast, shut your mouth. Guan Donglu turned pale with fright and hastily shouted. Unfortunately, his words were like the wind and it was too late. Guan Qinghan raised her head in panic, and looked at her father in disbelief. Her face suddenly turned pale, and her lips trembled, but she was unable to utter a single word. Grandpa Jun and Jun Wui's faces sank, and even Jun Moxie was shocked. The hall was filled with a deathly silence. Chapter 174. Guan Donglu smiled as his cheeks were dripping with sweat. Please go ahead, take care of yourself. Jun Zhantian snorted as he walked in with a calm face. Guan Qinghan's status in the Jun family is only in name, this is an ironclad fact. The Jun family has repeatedly brought up the issue of annulling the engagement, but Guan Qinghan has always been unwilling to do so. But now, the Guan family has brought up the issue of annulling the engagement, which is completely different from the Jun family's initiative. The Guan family's main purpose in coming to Tianxiang City was to bring Guan Qinghan back, and conveniently annul the engagement. Both families are well aware of this purpose. But knowing is one thing, and the Guan family's initiative to bring it up is another. Even if the Guan family hadn't brought it up, Grandpa Jun and Third Master Jun would have been willing to facilitate this matter for the sake of Qinghan's happiness. But the Guan family's initiative is tantamount to slapping the Jun family in the face. Although this was purely a matter of face. But this face, the Jun family cannot afford to lose. What was originally a good thing has become a difficult matter to resolve in a split second. Jun Wui's eyes flashed as he slowly said, so that's how it is. Pondering for a moment, he continued, as for Qinghan's matter, we'll discuss it later. Right now, I just want to know what the second young master Guan wants to do today. Guan Donglu was at a loss for a moment. As the head of the family, this is the first time in his life that he has felt so helpless. Jun Moxie, you've humiliated you, so you're my mortal enemy. Guan Qingyu sneered, don't tell me that your Jun family wants to force me to stay here. No wonder you said that you're despicable and shameless, and that she wanted to retaliate against you, so you're really so hateful. Since you've luckily escaped today, then I'll take revenge for you. If you're still a man, then accept this young master's challenge. This brat actually spilled everything out, and he even had a face full of righteousness and indignation. Is this what an idiot looks like? Or perhaps it could be said that newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. In fact, it was no surprise. The butler was famous in the entire eastern region. As the second young master of the Guan family, Guan Qingyue was like a local tyrant. Even though he had arrived in Tianxiang City, he still felt that the Jun family was only an aristocratic family with some power and influence. How could it compare to the Guan family Xian Qi family? In fact, even the officials of the eastern region had to be polite to him. Therefore, in his young heart, he really didn't put the Jun family in his eyes. Especially when he saw the 3 generations of the Jun family today. One was so old that he was about to enter his coffin, one was a debauchee, and one was a cripple. What kind of people were they? He had undoubtedly overlooked a very important point. Xian Qi aristocratic families were admittedly powerful, but they were only a Jianghu aristocratic family. So long as they weren't able to reach the legendary level of strength of the Silver Blizzard City, they would have to accept the restrictions of the secular world. The Jun family may not have a single expert, but it still represented the highest authority in the military. Able to mobilize the entire nation's military forces. Regardless of whether it was in the secular world or a super-aristocratic family, authority was the only thing that could truly dominate everything. Superb martial arts could at most kill hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of people, but it could never rule a country, a city, or even a village. But authority could. This was the biggest difference between the Guan family and the Jun family. This was also an insurmountable gap. To put it bluntly, the Guan family's prestige was indeed extraordinary, but it wasn't enough for the officials of the eastern region to give face. The only reason why the officials of the Guan family gave face to the Guan family was because their eldest daughter was the daughter-in-law of the Jun family. You were lucky enough to escape today. Jun Wui softly repeated this sentence, and then suddenly raised his head. Second young master Guan, so you were involved in the assassination attempt this afternoon? Or were you the one who planned it? Jun Wui's eyes were as sharp as a divine arrow, and suddenly a monstrous murderous aura surged out from his body. The previous dispute could have been regarded as a child's quarrel, and Jun Wui naturally did not want to go overboard, but Guan Qingyu's words made Jun Wui truly angry. Today was the first time he had the intention to kill someone. How could a fledgling youth resist the might of the blood general? I didn't. Guan Qingyu suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, but he still cried out in alarm, assassination? What assassination? It was just a simple lesson. How did it turn into an attempt to kill him? At that time, I didn't know that Jun Moxie was so hateful, and if they really wanted to kill him, why would I tell them? If this young master really wanted to kill him, do you think he would be able to escape? Jun Wui, Guan Donglu, Guan Rushan, Guan Qinghan, and Jun Moxie couldn't help but sigh in unison. It was obvious that this second young master Guan was nothing more than a tool in the eyes of Lady Yu. She used him to achieve her goals in the east, and then left for Tianxiang. Now, she used him to obtain information about Jun Moxie's whereabouts, and then set up an ambush to kill him. And Guan Qingyu was obviously a chess piece that had been abandoned by her. Apart from Guan Qingbo and Guan Qinghan, who were still young and inexperienced, the rest of the people present were all smart people. Although Guan Qingyu's words were only a small part of the story, but everyone else was able to understand the whole story. Guan Donglu let out a long sigh, and a look of despair appeared in his eyes. His second son had cursed the only heir of the Jun family, and even threatened to kill him. This wasn't a big deal, but his second son had participated in the assassination of the only heir of the Jun family. It wasn't difficult for Guan Donglu to imagine what would happen to his son in the future. However, he felt sad because his son had only been in Tianxiang City for a mere 2 days. But, his son had actually done so many things that could be said to be earth-shattering and earth-shattering. And the most ridiculous thing was that every single one of these matters was related to Jun Xia, and was a matter of life and death. "You idiot, you've been used by that bitch," Guan Donglu weakly said. Qingyu, where did your usual cleverness go? You actually stepped into such a trap. We're in Tianxiang City right now." He didn't even have the mood to reprimand his son. "Used? Of course I know." Guan Qingyu's face twitched in pain. "When she was still in the East, she used me more than once, and I know every time. But you don't know that I'm happy to be used by her. I'm willing to be used by her. I'm really happy. I'm really happy." Guan Qingyue roared, his handsome face contorted into a sinister expression. "The fact that she can use me means that I'm still valuable in her eyes. If she doesn't even bother to use me, then what value do I have? Are you just going to be a hedonistic son of a rich family? I'm willing to be used by her." The young man's stubborn voice echoed in the hall, and in an instant, the hall became silent, and there wasn't a second voice. On Guan Qingyu's face, 2 lines of tears finally flowed out. Jun Moxie sighed. In both his previous and current life, he had always been a heartless person. To be the strongest assassin, one must be heartless and ruthless, and abandon all emotions and love. Only then can one truly be free from all attachments, and kill everyone in the world. But as a martial artist who pursues the pinnacle of martial arts, he must overcome the barrier of love. And the only barrier that Jun Moxie hadn't overcome was the barrier of love. It wasn't that he couldn't, but he didn't dare. He didn't dare, and this was the only thing that Jun Moxie didn't dare to do. The barrier of love. Since ancient times, the barrier of love has been difficult to overcome. How many heroes and peerless beauties have fallen at the barrier of love? The word love has been passed down through the ages, but how many people have been able to overcome the barrier of love? One must first have feelings and throw oneself into it, only then can one overcome the barrier. But once one throws oneself into it, most people would have no regrets, even if their body and soul were to burn. Ask the world, what is love? It's called life and death. At this moment, everyone in the hall could clearly feel the depth of Guan Qingyu's love, and the bitterness of it. It was a kind of helpless despair, powerless sorrow, and a sense of hopelessness. Among them, Guan Qinghan felt it the most. In this world, if there was a man who would sacrifice himself for her without any regrets, Mou. You've let me down. Jun Wui had been in love for 10 years, and naturally understood this kind of hopelessness. He couldn't help but sigh, and his killing intent was greatly reduced. For the first time, Jun Moxie had a look of respect on his face. Of course, it was because Guan Qingyu had hurt him, but the depth of his feelings was worthy of admiration. Even though his feelings were doomed to be hopeless. Because no matter what, in Jun Moxie's heart, Yu was not some irreplaceable goddess, but a woman who must be killed. Even if she was willing to accept Guan Qingyu's feelings, Jun Moxie would never allow such a woman to live in this world. Sympathy was one thing, and respect was another. Just because you have feelings doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. If it threatens your own safety, then even if your feelings are higher than the sky, and your love is deeper than the sea, so what? Guan Qingyu's life was destined to be a tragedy. And this tragedy was unavoidable. Jun Xia gave Jun Wui a meaningful look. Jun Wui was startled for a moment, but then immediately understood. His eyelids drooped down. Jun Wui had a similar experience, and he was very sympathetic towards this infatuated man. But, it would be a completely different matter if this infatuated man were to endanger the safety of the Jun family. So that's how it is, the truth has come to light. It turns out that second brother Guan is an infatuated man. I admire him. The previous hostility was just a small matter, it was just a small joke between us youngsters, Why did the older generation get involved? Jun Moxie showed a rare magnanimity. Jun Mo-sia would always admire a person who was completely immersed in love, no matter how inflexible or foolish he was. Because he didn't dare to enter. Of course, even if he was an infatuated man, and even if Jun Moxie admired him, he would not hesitate to kill him.